Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show, and I'm glad that you can join me. Bit of a late start this morning. I got to be honest, I was scrambling. My alarm it went off, but the volume was low. But I am here nonetheless. I'm glad that all of you can join me. Big news. Big, super, extreme, amazing news. Trump has cut funding to Ukraine after the meeting at the White House. The meeting where Zelensky threw a hissy fit, Trump cut funding. And I thought he might, because during that meeting, Donald Trump had a conversation where he pointed out, I empowered you to be a tough guy. And what he means by that is the support, the money, the weapons, everything that we have provided to you has given you this impression of strength that you don't have and that you will not have without us. Fair enough. And my thought was, Trump is going to cut funding. If he's going that direction, he's going to cut funding. Then the report came out. He was thinking about cutting funding. And then a few hours later, he cut funding. I want to show other footage from that meeting, never before seen between Trump and Zelensky, that again kind of gets across how bad things have gotten in that meeting between them. And I want to go into a little bit of analysis before Lath comes on about it. So this is never before seen footage of Trump and Zelensky at the meeting. Obviously, this is not necessarily what you want out of a presidential meeting. I mean, this is pretty bad. Yeah, this is pretty bad. That's not what you want in a meeting. Yeah, you don't want that in a meeting. It's not what you want. It's just not what you want. It didn't go well. It did not go well. It did not go well. And right here, just to make it plain, this is Reuters. They're saying Trump pauses aid. They can call it that if they want. Right here. Ukraine says it will do all it can after Trump to maintain ties after Trump pauses aid. And to go into it, Ukraine said on Tuesday it would do all it can to maintain its ties with the United States after President Trump paused military aid to Kiev in the most dramatic step yet in the pivot towards closer ties with Russia. Trump has upended U.S. policy on Ukraine and Russia, culminated in an explosive confrontation in the White House on Friday. Now, right here, President Trump has been clear. Where is it? Okay. I'm going to have to go and find the article. Bloomberg does a better version of this than Reuters, because it seems that the only thing Reuters cares about is, oh my God, Donald Trump paused aid. How are we going to keep our ties to Ukraine? As opposed to going in and explaining what has been stopped. And it's effectively everything. Like all of the money, all of the equipment, even equipment that is in other locations. So for right here, U.S. President Trump has instructed the Defense Department to pause all military aid to Ukraine following a public spat with Zelensky. According to Bloomberg, the freeze affects the equipment already designated for delivery, including weapons in transit on aircraft and ships and waiting in transit areas such as Poland. The suspension will stay in place until Trump sees that Ukrainian leaders, quote, demonstrate a good faith commitment to peace, unquote, Bloomberg said, citing a senior Pentagon official. According to the New York Times, the order takes place immediately and affects more than $1 billion in arms and ammunition in the pipeline on order. Quote, the president has been clear that he's focused on peace. We need partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution, unquote, the White House told Reuters. Wall Street Journal reported earlier on Monday that the White House has stopped funding new weapons sales in Ukraine and was considering freezing weapons shipments. It all stops. It all stops. You pissed off Papa. How do you come to the White House and get a pissing match with Donald Trump in the Oval Office in front of the press and expect that to go well? And I would say to expect that to go well to any world leader at the point where you're coming into their place and you're doing that, especially when you're a beggar and a panhandler and you are sitting out there with your hat in your hand in your janitorial outfit, and they're looking at you as a beggar and as a janitor who's begging them for money, which you are begging them for money. That was never going to go well. That was always going to go poorly. And Donald Trump's response is, fair enough. You think you can bite the hand that feeds you? I wish I could show the clip from Dead Presidents, where the pimp comes down the stairs. You know what I'm talking about. Pimp comes down the stairs, and the guy hits him and says, don't bite the hand that feeds you, inward, and puts the gun in his mouth. That's this. That's this. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. On top of that, Donald Trump has also decided to roll back sanctions, or at the very least go through the actions of rolling back sanctions and directing the Treasury Department and there was another department to find ways of sanction relief. So that's the other thing. Also, RT apparently sent the request directly asking for recognition, effectively saying, hey, could you also roll back the sanctions that is affecting our media in this country? All of these people lost their jobs. They lost their jobs from a spiteful Biden administration for a war we were against. You're against. Bring us back. Now, whether Trump does this, who knows? Whether this is even in his mind, who knows? But all of this stuff is coming to a head now. Trump says, I want peace. Zelensky says he does not. Trump says, fair enough. Figure it out on your own. The gang of European idiots that are still gyrating about in Europe have also had another emergency meeting that had been planned weeks in advance in order to complain and bitch at Donald Trump. And while they're complaining about Donald Trump, they are simultaneously begging the United States to give them a backstop, a plan that Donald Trump told Starmer no and Macron no. They've gotten themselves into another tizzy, and they've come up with effectively the same plan, in which case Trump will also tell them once again, no. Zelensky, for his part, after having his bitch fit in the meeting in the Oval Office, he has decided, okay, I will sign your mineral deal. Now, this is after Europeans coddled, hugged, massaged. Oh, it's not that bad. That bad mean Donald Trump said bad things about you. But what they communicated to him was, sign the deal. Sign the deal, you stupid idiot, sign the deal. Now, the reason, as I pointed out before, that they wanted him to sign the deal is because in their mind, that this deal is a backdoor security guarantees. That if Donald Trump signs, whether he gives security guarantees or not, that Ukraine would effectively, in part, belong to the U.S., and the U.S. will want to maintain security of territory to which they, in part, own. And so if he signs it, then he will almost by definition protect it. And so when Zelensky pulled his hissy fit, then he destroyed the plan. Meaning the stupid idiot didn't stick to the plan to trick the US president into entanglements into Ukraine. He pulled the hissy fit and left. He couldn't stay on script. So all of these European leaders pushed Zelensky, hey, go back and sign that deal. What is wrong with you, you stupid idiot? Go back and sign that deal. So Zelensky comes back and says, okay, I will sign the deal. I will sign the deal. Problem for Zelensky is that we have moved beyond the deal. We've moved to you. And what we've moved to you is, A, you're going to have to eat some ass. You're going to eat some ass. Spoon in hand. You're going to have to eat Trump's ass. First, before you even get in the White House. Get in there, Zelensky. Get in there. Eat it. That's going to have to happen. Two, on top of that, you will have to show that you're willing for a ceasefire. Whether Russia wants it or not is irrelevant. You will have to show that you're for a ceasefire. You will have to show that you're willing to compromise and come to some kind of agreement. You will have to show those things, meaning we've moved beyond just signing a deal. There are now consequences. And part of those consequences is I am going to put the screws to Zelensky in order to bend him into form, just like I bent all of these other Republicans into form, just like I bent Walz into form and Rubio into form. All of these people who don't believe in this agenda but are doing this agenda, you will also be bent into form. That is the point. It is beyond him signing the agreement. It is going to being forcing Zelensky into a peace deal or peace agreement, or at the very least, a ceasefire. Zelensky screwed up. Zelensky screwed up royally. And look, just to, I guess my point is there are consequences. And Trump is enacting those consequences. I want to bring in my guest, though. We are joined with the man of the hour, Laith Maloof. Laith Maloof is award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. Laith, thank you, my man. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Good to be with you, Jamal. I'm doing great.
Oh, man, it's good to have you. Laith, I am trying to understand what is happening in Gaza right now. It seems that Netanyahu is doing any and everything in his power to blow off any kind of peace agreement. I don't even think at this point they're moving to the second phase of the peace agreement. My understanding is that Israel has cut off all humanitarian aid going into Gaza at this point. Effectively, we are resuming the war of starvation on the local population. What is happening on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They are resuming the war of starvation on the Palestinian people in Gaza. And they're doing it out of spite because of that Ramadan is now there, and people in Gaza had the audacity to celebrate the first night of Ramadan, and thus, we know how colonizers hate joy in the eyes of the indigenous, and that's what they're doing. So obviously, what Netanyahu and the Jewish white supremacists around him have learned from the 16 months that passed is that they can get away with anything as long as there's no military power to stop them, that the Western elite will protect them and coddle them and make sure that there's no legal or political consequences for their war crimes and crimes against humanity. So as long as there's nobody that will militarily stop the Zionists, they will continue on this project to ethnically cleanse and or genocide the Palestinians from their homelands.
I guess my thing is Egypt and Jordan have said no, so the expulsion plan is off the table. Egypt at some point put out a $20 billion plan in order to rebuild Gaza. But again, all of that is fitting kind of within the context of the war now. So the ceasefire is over with. Is that fair to say?
I mean, it's not sure that it's totally over with, but obviously because the expulsion plan or the ethnic cleansing plan is off the table because the Jordanian and Egyptian vassal regimes are scared that they will collapse if they go on with what Master in the White House wanted. That means that we're back to plan A, which is the genocide. If you can't push out the Palestinians, you have to kill them. Otherwise, there is no Jewish majority in historical Palestine. It's been now almost a decade that the Palestinians have bounced back to being the majority within the historical lands of Palestine, and that's a formula for the dissolution of the colony. It can't exist as a Jewish supremacist colony if the majority of the population is not. So, we saw today the Israelis shoot at anybody approaching the the crossing points into Gaza.
Right.
All the trucks have been turned around. There resumed bombardments of parts of Gaza. There was at least like 10 martyrs, victims over the last 24 hours in these bombardments. And but at the same time, we are getting conflicting messages from the Israeli elites. So Katz, the foreign affairs minister, just said right now that they're ready to negotiate phase two. That's like less than 12 hours from statements from other ministers saying there will be no phase two. So
Right.
it's very confusing what they want, and I think they don't even know what they want to do, the Zionists themselves.
So there's a report that's saying Gaza must demilitarize before the next phase of the ceasefire. This is coming out of Al Jazeera, saying that Israel is now saying this. But as you pointed out, I've heard multiple things. I've heard in one part, we are ready to negotiate phase two. And I've heard there is no phase two going forward. Apparently, they said that the hostages that were released were being humiliated by Hamas fighters standing there. Okay, that's nonsense, right? Give me your take, your best take of what's happening.
It's funny. Of course, it's funny how severe the opposite day syndrome is with the Zionists when Israeli prisoners of war are treated nicely and given gifts and dressed up well and fed and given medical care, and people, shaking hands with them and putting them on an ambulance back to their home. That's humiliation.
Yeah.
And starvation of Palestinian prisoners and their torture and
Beating,
abuse and putting
starvation,
them in t-shirts with stars of David on them, and throwing the dead bodies in piles of bags in the back of truck and just with no names, no identifier. That's treating the Palestinians well.
That's
So
humane.
everything that the Zionists say is now in the upside down world, and it's crazy how docile the Western media has become.
Yes.
16 months ago, remember, they used to try to convince you that Israel is not attacking hospitals, or Israel is not attacking mosques, or Israel is not killing children or women. Now they don't give a damn anymore, the Western media. And that's also shows you how ineffective the Western populations have been in trying to influence their governments to stop these war crimes, or trying to influence the mainstream media. So in a way, like as a Palestinian, as an Arab, I have lost any hope in bringing any change through the population in the West, doing social movements or whatever it is. Clearly, the Western elite don't care about the opinions of their populations, and clearly the Western populations are impotent to assert any change, even to save themselves. Forget the Palestinians. I don't think anyone in the U.S. or Canada or Europe can get themselves better healthcare or better racial relations or better working conditions or better education, let alone try to come and help the Palestinians end the complicity of those governments that they represent them in this genocide. So
Hamas is saying that they are willing to not be part of the post-war government, providing that there's a national consensus. That basically, if the public votes and it votes us out, fair enough, we accept that. But obviously, we're not going to evaporate. We're still a power, even if we're not in power. Egypt is saying they have a $53 billion plan now. It's gone up over the course of 5 years. And in that plan, they're talking about a transitional government into something else. They're talking about building an airport, a harbor, effectively rebuilding this area. I mean, where do you think this goes? Does this have legs? I mean, Israel's main issue, we don't want Hamas in charge. Hamas says, okay, fair enough. We don't need to be in charge, but obviously we're human beings. We're going to be here, even if we're not necessarily Hamas, and even if we're not necessarily in charge. And they seem to be accepting, seems to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this plan to rebuild the area and the guys, or the, let's say, the premise that they are not in power. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, look, Hamas is trying to walk uh, the path till the end with the Zionists, who always, in general, never, you know, and their word doesn't hold. So this is also all crazy talk because the Palestinian Authority, for instance, that could be a replacement for Hamas in Gaza, doesn't have any support in Gaza, let alone
Mhm.
inside the West Bank, and doesn't have the might, or whether even if it's weapons and or enough troops to hold on to Gaza on behalf of the West. So it's already a impossible. Okay, with even if Hamas just steps aside. The other thing is that if the Palestinians have been denied the right to a democratic election since Hamas won the last election in 2005 or whatever it is right now. It's like so many years ago. So the Palestinians have been denied this democratic right because everybody knows that even if Hamas didn't win, clearly the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, and Mahmoud Abbas will be demolished in any election. Okay, they
Yeah.
will cease to exist. Okay, they probably will get less than 2%, 3% of the vote. And over the last decade, there's been many attempts by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the PFLP and other Palestinian groups to create a unity government with these collaborators in the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas. And every time it was getting to the last stage, it was Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority that collapsed the efforts, whether it was the meetings in Algiers, in Moscow, in Peking, you know, so many capitals opened their doors to try to bring a unity government with between Mahmoud Abbas and the other Palestinian factions, and it's not worked. So Mahmoud Abbas is not has no intention of allowing a national unity government to be formed. He wants to stay probably in power till he dies, and we all Palestinians pray every day for his death, actually, and demise,
Yeah.
even if it's natural causes. The guy is almost 90 years old, and the minute uh, Mahmoud Abbas ceases to exist, I don't know what the Israelis are going to do. There's going to be nothing left to stop the Palestinian people coming together. So, in the meanwhile, $53 billion to rebuild Gaza, that's probably going to be even on a low side of the costs of to rebuild the whole province. And even if they start today, it's going to take uh, probably a decade to rebuild the place. Israel never allowed a port or an airport to exist in Gaza before, so
Right.
why would they allow it now? A lot of things that are being thrown out right now are in the imaginary realm because what is going to decide everything is what's on the ground in Gaza. Everything else is just talk, a hot air and blowing in the air.
Yeah, but I do get that. But there is going to be an endpoint. Or do you think there's not going to be an endpoint? Like, I see. And I guess I agree with this take. It's a settler colonial state, and they have an objective to either expel everybody or kill everybody. So this idea that they're going to build a harbor, a port, that they're going to build hotels, they're going to make this a good property, it's nonsense. That's not the objective. The objective is a constant, persistent objective of taking the land. Is that your take? That these deals, these are just things that they're talking about. And the reality of it is, this is a war. This war is going to continue to take place until either Israel collapses or the Palestinian population is all murdered or expelled. Is that your take? I mean, give me your take. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's what it
No,
sounds.
I mean, you are right there. Look, the we're right now in the break between the two halves of the game, okay, of the war that started 16 months ago. We're now in a pause, and it's going to come back, this war, both in Gaza, and as we see in the West Bank, is ongoing and is accelerating, and even in Lebanon, and maybe in Syria and Iran. And what we see with the United States withdrawing its military support and its funding of Ukraine, this is all now being diverted directly into
Into
the
Israel.
Zionist colony, right? And they're preparing for the next stage of the war. They know that if there's a secession, complete secession of hostilities, okay, and a actual pause of killing, then it is the reckoning time for the leadership of Israel, for its military leaders, for the Western elite, for the Western media. It'll be reckoning time, right? Everybody's going to be put into question, whether internally in Israel, having all these internal investigations about their failures
Mhm.
and or the corruption or what have you, that will accelerate the collapse internally of Israel, and or in the West with all these court cases that are now piling, that are going to start reaching Western elected politicians that voted for and supported the genocide in Gaza. So there's no way that the Zionist colony and the West that backs it will allow a total cessation of hostility right now, because of what will happen if such thing happens. So we're right now all waiting for the moment when Israel says they have enough weapons and enough cash to re-trigger a wider war again and try to finish off the Palestinians and the resistance in Lebanon, and or even attack Israel with those thousands upon thousands of bunker buster bombs that Trump is delivering.
Yeah.
Something right like now 40 or 50 billion dollars of weapons delivered in the last month since the beginning of Trump's term. So I don't see anything hopeful coming out anytime soon, and everything that we will hear from now till the retriggering of the full-scale military hostilities is just wasting time and diversion of attention.
So just be clear, you don't believe that the second phase of the ceasefire will be implemented. That ultimately, whether it's now or whether it's later, Netanyahu will do everything he can, and he has, by the way, to destroy the deal in order to get back to hostilities, and basically to get back to an open warfare environment.
Yes, yes. I think, and even if they do move into the second phase, it will not be a complete situation. As we saw how even in the first phase, everything was delayed here, delayed
Right.
there, stretched here, stretched there, bad statements by Israel one day, another statement that's good, and everybody's very confused. And by the way, they're already re-arresting some of the Palestinian prisoners that were released over the last few weeks in the West Bank. It's ridiculous, obviously, and every day we're hearing a different Palestinian prisoner dying inside Israeli jails from torture and mistreatment and rape and what have you. Every day, every day. So the none of what happened already in the first phase is optimistic for
Second
anybody.
phase.
Yeah.
What is the Palestinian Authority doing in the West Bank when Israel is killing these people, or or bulldozing the streets, destroying property? What is the what is their role? What are they doing in the West Bank as this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, the Palestinian Authority is like the Vichy regime during the Nazi occupation of France. They have been actually rounding up Palestinian uh, well-known figures in the West Bank that are not even armed. They're rounding up any opposition to the Palestinian Authority, even writers and thinkers. This is above and beyond their raids that the Palestinian Authority security forces are conducting on villages around Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus, to kind of preempt the Israeli invasion into those villages by nabbing anyone that could be associated with the resistance and could resist the invasion of those villages. So this is happening while, of course, the Israelis have totally destroyed the Jenin refugee camp, the Tulkarem refugee camp, and the Nur Shams refugee camp outside Nablus, and have now moved into the three cities proper, trying to ethnically cleanse, neighborhood by neighborhood, while the Palestinian Authority is just sitting there and watching, and probably even giving them directives and or lists of names of people that the Israelis should arrest and or kill. And so there is no hope in such a regime to somehow care for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority is the Vichy regime reincarnated. The only thing forward for the Palestinians in the West Bank and globally, I think, is to try to take out the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas's cabal from control. And this is, important for Palestinians that are in the diaspora in the West, that have been demonstrating in front of Israeli embassies and so forth for 16 months. They should be actually demonstrating at the Palestinian Authority missions. They should be taking over those missions. They should be throwing out the representatives of Mahmoud Abbas and appointing their own representation. By the way, for our listeners to understand, the vast majority of Palestinians in the world are in diaspora. They're not inside Palestine, whether it's the West Bank, Gaza, or the 1948 territories. 2/3 of the Palestinians are in exile around the world, and they have no say in either the elections that happen inside Palestine and or what's happening in these structures of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and these embassies. And it is time right now for these Palestinian communities to take lead, since they have the most freedom. Freedom, unlike the people in Gaza and the West Bank are being under guns, and or the Palestinian refugees that are in the Arabic countries near them that are silenced by the collaborative regimes like Jordan and Egypt. The Palestinians in the Western diaspora have a duty and an ability to do things that their brothers and sisters elsewhere can't.
I was having a conversation with Dan Kabalik, and Dan pointed out, he says, look, Israel may be riding high now, but this is not going to last. And his point was, they're overextended, and B, on top of being overextended, they believe that the United States is going to be, let's say, back them for the foreseeable future as they go about doing all of this, but that it can't last, that there's no way that they can live under these contradictions. I mean, for God's sake, you've killed all of these people, you've murdered all of these children, you've stolen all of this territory. The rest of the world considers you a pariah. Is he right, though? Like, I mean, is it possible for a pariah state to exist with the assistance of the United States by itself? And again, this is also goes into this idea of Israel is supposed to be a safe place. It is not. They've lost. The economy has in tatters. The number of people, millions of people have fled the country. Meaning, how can you have a country of Israel if indeed it's not safe, if it's supposed to be a safe place? That was his point, that at some point it collapses. It can't function. Give me your take on that. I mean, do you see it that way also?
Yeah, I mean, I love Dan. He was here in Lebanon, and we toured with him in the south, and
Yeah.
did. So he's a great guy. He has a lot of history in struggles that are anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist, and he is right there. But that doesn't mean that in the meanwhile there's not going to be a lot of death.
Yes.
The Zionist colony has lost the war. Yes, there's thousands upon thousands of massacred people in Gaza, in Lebanon and this mass destruction of infrastructure and so on. But with all the combined might of the West, they were not able to defeat neither Hamas and or Hezbollah,
Right.
even
They
with all
still
the
did.
losses that these groups had. They had to call for a ceasefire because Israel ran out of weapons, and the West had to reorganize all its, endeavors of war around the world just to now try to resupply this to push one more time. And we don't live in the 1800s or the 1700s when mass killings of indigenous peoples in the Americas, uh, could be ignored or not affect the global, village. We're in 2025. Anything that happens in Palestine affects all the way to Patagonia and to New Zealand and the corners of Canada.
Yeah.
It's and you can't maintain this. And also, the U.S. empire itself is on a retreat, and its military power is waning, its financial power is waning. It doesn't mean it's over yet. I don't like those people that exaggerate the collapse of the empire. Yes, it is collapsing, but it's going to take time. It's not going to be tomorrow or something like that. So, in the meanwhile, the Palestinians and the Arabic and Muslim peoples in the region that are seeking the liberation of Palestine need to up their military game. And, we saw in the first 16 months that the Axis of Resistance members decided to act morally in their war. They didn't target residential buildings. They didn't kill civilians for the hell of it. They didn't target synagogues. They didn't, they only targeted military positions, whether it's Hezbollah or Yemen or even Iran in its Two Throw Promise 1 and 2, only targeted military targets. And so the axis of resistance, when this war is re-triggered, given that its morality and its appeal to human dignity around the world did not go anywhere. Yes, we had everybody out in the streets, but that didn't save any Palestinians.
Right.
Yes, Israel was condemned in courts, but again, that didn't save Palestinians or stop the killing in Lebanon or the destruction of these countries. Therefore, in any new stage of this war, the axis of resistance has to be as ruthless as our enemy if we want to survive and not be just remembered as honorable warriors like, dead indigenous nations that fought the cruelty of the US. I don't want to be just a memory of being an honorable warrior. I want to be surviving and my nation to be surviving. And thus, Israeli civilians, Israeli infrastructure, Israeli synagogues, Israeli hospitals, Israeli news outlets should all be targets. And even Western reporters in our region, just like our hundreds of reporters that are killed here, Western reporters in our region should be also targets. American bases, American businesses. This is the only way we can survive. Do I care anymore about how the populations in the West look at me? Am I like monstrous or not? It doesn't matter. My humanism, my humanity doesn't change anything in the outcome of this war. Only surviving at any cost is now what's in front of us.
Yeah. No, I am what you made me. It's that, right? It's like you guys have. I mean, because the truth of the matter is, as I report the story, I think to myself, Hamas doesn't get reporting in the West. So the only thing you get is the Israeli point of view. And the Israeli point of view usually just lies. And so, yeah, you're bombing hospitals, you're bombing and killing reporters, you're killing journalists, you're killing reporters. And the reporting in the West is very muted on that, which is outrageous. That wouldn't necessarily be accepted. If Hamas did that, that would be front page news. Oh my God, I can't believe Hamas killed a journalist. Listen, the fact that Israel might have killed like 100. I totally understand your point on this. Laith, thank you for this. One last thing before I let you go. There's an Arab League meeting in Cairo for talks on Gaza. Give me a take on that. I've been greatly disheartened by the way Arab leaders have talked and done nothing. And now they're doing this we're trying to push this $1 billion or $35 billion deal. What do you think these talks are going to come out with? And this will be the last question.
Yeah, I mean, already Algeria is not going to be there because the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, the Egyptians and the Jordanians basically created this resolution and didn't discuss it with anybody.
Yeah.
Also, the Jolani or Julani, some people like to call him, the new governor in the colony now of Syria, is going to be there. So you could tell where this is going. It's going to be all talk. They're just trying to protect themselves in front of their own populations that are angry at this, what's happening. And I don't think no money, no food, no nothing's going to come from this Arabic non-Arab League. Actually, it should be called. It should be called the Hebrew League or something. This is what it is. Honestly, there's no. Yeah, there's no Arab sovereigns left right now. There's only Algeria is barely now the only sovereign out of all the Arabic states. Every other Arabic state is either partially occupied and or a total vassal of the West. So, I pity the Arabic people that I'm from.
Yeah, I've watched them complain for a year and a half and do nothing.
Yeah.
I've watched them complain. I suspect it's going to keep going. Laith Maloof, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. You can follow Laith. Where can people find you, Laith?
You can find us on freepalestine.video, the website, and from there's all the links to the social media of the TV station. We're producing all this daily reports from the West Bank and Lebanon. Please follow and donate so we can continue producing this content in English.
Very cool. Thank you, Laith. Stay strong, man. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. I want to take a moment. I want to say thank all of you for joining me. Hit the like button if you are indeed here and if you indeed dig this content. If you find yourself coming back here often, you can support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, super chats, memberships, all of those things. Like people say, buy me a cup of coffee. It helps cover the content. I want to bring in my next guest, great friend of the show, Ted Rall. He's a political analyst, syndicated columnist, and host of TMI, Too Much Information, with the great, the one and only, the magnificent, the beautiful Manila Chan. Ted Rall, what's going on, my man? How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm doing good. I'm enjoying probably the last truly cold day of 2025. So it's scheduled to warm up.
Yeah, it's going to be chilly. It was freezing last night. I was at my mom's house. And it was funny. I was at my mom's house when Garland hit me up. And he says, hey, did you see that Trump stopped all military aid to Ukraine in response to Zelensky's hissy fit at the White House?
Yep.
And I expected this on some level. I mean, in fact, Garland and I had preempted it when we were talking initially. There's a part in the conversation at that meeting where Donald Trump says, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And when he said that, I was like, uh-oh, what that means. Right here, this clip. Yeah, right here, this clip. Because what that means is you have taken a certain tact based purely upon what I have allowed and what the other idiot in office allowed prior. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Things are going to go bad for you if you keep this up. Okay, well, what does he mean things are going to go bad for you? You're going to fight it out on your own. That's what he means. And this is part of the tragic interview that initiated this.
The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. You're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, You'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think.
And he told him right there, all right, look, if you want to be this guy, you can be this guy without us. You don't have the cards. And yeah, that's effectively what he did. You're going to fight it out. You're going to fight it out without us. So right now, you're not getting any military assistance. Did you get that ham sandwich from us? Give me that. Did you get that tank? Give me that. Like, they are literally clawing back stuff. Like, even stuff that is in like Poland or somewhere that's about to be deployed, it all stops. Billions of dollars of weaponry, materials, assistance stops on a dime. He's going to have to fight it out. Now, Zelensky later was like, after talking to his European idiots, said, okay, I'll sign the deal. And as I pointed out to my mom, I was like, well, it's too late. You can't sign the deal now. Trump doesn't, like, this has gone beyond the deal. You have insulted Papa in his cathedral, and he is going to require you to eat some ass before you get back into his good graces. Trump is going to be standing there with the spoon at the White House door. All right, you ready? You ready? Cameras, are you watching? Get in there, Zelensky. Get in there. Get in there. Get in there. Clean it out. Because this has gone beyond. You've insulted him. That's the way they're talking about it. You've insulted us. And on top of insulted us, you are not welcome back until you're willing to agree to peace terms and to apologize on camera. That was the other part. You need to apologize on camera. And you need to agree to peace terms. And don't come back to the White House unless you're willing to do so. Give me a take on this. I'm fascinated by this. Zelensky has stepped in it on this.
Yeah, well, he sure has. So I have a bunch of stuff to say about this. I mean, first of all, Zelensky violated the rule of the parking garage that I used to be in Lower Manhattan. Every floor, there's a sign that says, know your level. And I always thought, in other words, remember where you parked your car. But I look at it more, metaphysically, like know your level in life, right? So when Zelensky goes into that Oval Office meeting, he's a supplicant, right? I mean, and he didn't act like a supplicant. He's acting like he's entitled. And it's like, well, but you're begging, right? You've got your little tin cup, and that's what you're doing. So he doesn't seem to know his level, or his shtick has been to pretend like he doesn't know his level. He probably does know his level. So there's that aspect of it.
And by the way, just to interrupt real quick, and he's even in his homeless outfit. Even his homeless outfit on top of,
it's
being
bad. Yeah, the no suit thing, it's always bothered me. I'm a leftist, but it bothers me. If I were somehow invited to the Oval Office, I'd wear a suit. I mean, and I'm a communist, but I'd wear a suit. So, I don't, a nice suit, probably a Prada suit. It's like, which I have. So like, I mean, yeah. So, I really don't understand, why he does this. It's also, you're right. The terms are going to change. The deal that was on offer is not going to be as attractive from a Ukrainian standpoint going forward. I think also what is super interesting to me was the way the media has managed this news. Most people saw that 10-minute clip, and that's on American television. 10 minutes is a long time for a clip. But that said, I had a very different impression. I first responded to it on the air after I'd seen the 10-minute clip, and I really felt like Vance and Trump had tag teamed and ambushed
Did you?
Zelensky.
I never felt that way.
But then I went and watched the whole thing. And then it completely changed my mind. No one told me, oh, go watch the whole thing and it'll change your mind. I just wanted to see the whole thing. And it completely, I flipped on that. I was
why? What was the difference? Because see, when I first saw the clip, I thought, okay, Zelensky's still in his fit. Because from my take is you're in the Oval Office, you're popping off at the vice president. That's the way I took it.
Well, and that's true, true. But it seemed the part that made me think that was incorrectly was that the way it was edited, it made Vance look like like when you see those clips of abusive police officers.
Yeah.
And they're like, and they yell at the suspect who's prone and handcuffed and on the belly, on the ground, under the knees of 3 heavy cops. And they're, stop resisting.
Right.
And the guy's like, I'm not
Right.
resisting.
Right.
Stop moving. I'm not moving. And you can't see him move or resist. You know, he couldn't resist.
It's
if
like
he
the
wanted
guy's
to.
down. Your knee is on the guy's throat. You're
Right,
screaming,
like he's
"Stop
not resisting, right? So this is what it looked like. Vance was kind of like responding to something that that he had that Zelensky hadn't said.
Yeah.
Right? The way it was edited is it sort of looked like Zelensky sort of is giving his little 2014 history lesson about Maidan, and then suddenly, Vance comes at him like for not saying thank you, and you're like, oh, you just sort of, you've decided to go after him. And there was the power of suggestion. I had read some reporting a week earlier that suggested that Trump and Vance wanted to get rid of Zelensky. They didn't view him as a negotiating partner who could come to the table. I think it was Politico or The Hill.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like thinking, oh, this is it. They've decided to fuck him hard, right? And then when I watched the whole thing, I'm like, that's not what happened at all. I mean, it's like what happened is that the whole, like for 40 minutes, things are extremely collegial and friendly. Zelensky's acting weird and irritating when he starts showing the pictures of the skinny, Ukrainian POWs who'd been released by Russia, the before and after shot, it's like, the diet shot on steroids, and it's like, and it's one after another. There's like 15. And it's like, I'm like, dude, you're on television. What,
right. Right.
What are you doing? And it's like this. It's like if he'd just shown 1 or 2, I would have understood, right? It's like Trump would have been like, I get the picture, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, he just keeps going on and on, and you can just see Trump getting increasingly irritated. And Vance also, and then at one point, Zelensky says, like, we've been fighting alone. And it's like, now, if my country just sent $350 billion to your country, okay, granted, we technically didn't send troops, although we did send mercenaries and we did have CIA guys and targeting people. And we know there was covert stuff. But I mean, okay, we didn't, it wasn't D-Day. It wasn't Normandy Beach. Okay, fine. But, the point is they weren't fighting alone. Do not tell me, like after I've sent you a third of $1 trillion that you're fighting alone. So it's like we could use that money for something else, anything else. We can just like everybody gets a free quarter pounder, something else. It's like, so it's just the whole thing is so Zelensky was acting like. So I wrote about this. I think the Wall Street Journal is going to take it, and it's not unprecedented, right? I mean, it's been talked about as like, a U.S. and its allies, or they never have these kind of disagreements. Right. That's not true. And like, for example, FDR absolutely hated Charles de Gaulle, the head of the Free French during World War II. Hated him. Thought he was a little arrogant pipsqueak without portfolio, not grateful enough, always making demands, always wanted more and more and more, did all sorts of shit without asking permission or consulting with the Allies. And also he didn't really like France, and he thought the French had gotten defeated too quickly, and who the fuck are the French to deserve our help, right? I mean, he was the only person in the administration who felt like that, but he was the president. So and it took a lot of finagling on the part of Churchill and Eisenhower to change that. Anyway, the point is, it's not without precedent. And one of the things in World War II that people don't know is that the U.S. government never recognized the Free French as the government of exile of France, of occupied France. They recognized Vichy until Vichy severed relations in late 1942. So Vichy was the officially U.S. We had an ambassador at Vichy. It's really Admiral Leahy, who's the father, I believe, of the U.S. senator, might be grandfather. So
I did not know that, Ted.
yeah, so it's like it's an interesting little chapter in history, and I mean, the details of it are crazy. Like the U.S. plans. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the point is that getting back to Zelensky, he obviously has decided his method is similar to de Gaulle's, in that de Gaulle realized that he didn't have a close friend in the White House. So he took his case directly to the media. He fundraised across the United States. He was popular in the press. Sound familiar?
That doesn't work in this case.
And he
Trump hates the press.
I'm sure Zelensky, as a student of history, because everyone is outside of the United States. I'm sure he knows about the de Gaulle example. I'm sure he does.
So.
Oh, 100%. He even dresses that way. Too much credit.
I think Zelensky has gotten so accustomed to, hey, come and give a speech to Congress. Hey, come shake my hand. Hey, you're so great. You're the Winston
cover of Vogue.
Yeah, the Vogue magazine cover. I mean, I think he got so accustomed to that over the years.
The star treatment. But I think he thinks public opinion is the key to American support. And it's like, that's public opinion matters, but not when you're Donald J. Trump.
Exactly.
Donald J. Trump gives no shits temperamentally. But on top of that, because of the unique circumstances of what happened to him over the last 4 years and him defeating all that and becoming president anyway, he owes no one anything. And he's in his second term. He's a lame duck. He does not care what the media has to say about him. The media hates him anyway. So he doesn't. So he just does what he wants, and that I think is the calculus that Ukrainians failed to see.
And more importantly, Trump won the election on ending the war.
True. Meaning, it was part of it. Yeah,
it was part of it. Meaning the American public said, "Yes, we want this war over with, full stop." And so Zelensky making this pitch to the public doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like it's so off base. It's Trump giving you money, not the public. As you pointed out, Trump is a lame duck. He doesn't care. Meaning, even if the public was against him on it, he ran on winning, on closing the war. And
he doesn't expect, I don't think, to do anything his last 2 years. I think the midterms do not worry him at all. He's doing it all in the next few months.
And right here, this maybe Zelensky didn't see this. This is CNN going over the approval in regards to the Ukrainian war. Listen to what he's saying.
Compared to how they felt about Joe Biden. So this is the net approval rating. You look at Joe Biden back in 2024, he was 22 points underwater. Holy cow. You look at Donald Trump, it's just a different planet entirely. I mean, the gulf between these.
Yeah.
Trump is up to, Joe Biden was in the tank, negative 22 on this issue. And so if you are Trump and you're looking at that, you're gold. Meaning the public backs what you're doing on this issue. And so regardless
and why wouldn't they? It fits all the metrics of the way Americans feel about war. It's like it's been going on for a while. We're losing and the economy is bad here. So people feel that the economy is bad. So they don't like to see money going overseas. When those things happen, support for war goes away.
And the other guy was pushing to a nuclear war. That too.
Right.
Like meaning
although the interesting thing is Americans are still very negative about Russia, right? Like they don't they don't trust. It's hilarious. They don't trust Putin. It's like, okay, but name one time when Putin ever made an agreement that
they don't know
that he broke or lied about. I mean, he doesn't Putin doesn't lie. He just doesn't. It's not his bag.
He's a lawyer. I would imagine he lies like a lawyer if he does, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's what he leaves out.
Yeah, right. right. It's the gray areas of things, right?
But I think honestly, it's like, I love that stupid thing. Well, all my liberal friends, my Democratic friends are all like, well, you can't trust Putin. It's like, so you can't, I'm like, well, okay, by that standard, then no one can ever have a negotiation with anyone. No one can ever buy a house from anyone and trust that the seller's going to do what they said in the contract. Right. No one can ever settle a war because, the two sides, why did the Americans trust the Japanese to keep their end of the surrender agreement? Because you have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can't move forward as a society. It's ridiculous.
Also, the opinion is a bit rich considering we blow off agreements in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
JCPOA.
It's projection.
Yeah, missile agreements gone, Minsk agreements gone. But like we don't care. We would blow those things off in a heartbeat. So it's a bit rich that they're saying, "Oh, we can't trust Putin." But you are right. The polling that came out on trusting Putin, I think it was like 80% or something like that, distrusted.
It kind of blew me away. I was like, why?
Yeah,
it's propaganda. It's purely propaganda.
Pure propaganda. Like, because those people wouldn't. I would wager to you that most of them couldn't think of one agreement.
I just wrote my column about this yesterday, where it's like, oh, everybody said, Russia's trying to put the band back together. They want the Soviet Union back. So I have all these quotes, right, where Putin's saying exactly the opposite. Yeah. Like, he's like, anybody who, like, his famous quote is, he's paraphrasing Disraeli, where he says, anybody who doesn't miss the Soviet Union is cruel. Anybody who wants it back is stupid. Right. And it's like, basically, like, nobody's bringing back the Soviet Union. Nobody wants to. It's not our aim. We don't want to. It's not practical. It doesn't make any sense. He says it over and over again. And then he's misquoted, and they always talk about the first part of that equation. Well, he said that it was a catastrophe. The collapse of the Soviet Union was a catastrophe. It was a geopolitical catastrophe, and not just for the Russians, for the world. I mean, I would argue that it fucked over the United States, because it made us. We no longer had a socialist competitor, a different ideology, a different way of doing things to compete with in the marketplace of ideas. And it made us fat and arrogant. And we stopped trying and working as hard to make our ideas work and compete around the world.
Yeah. Federation before back to Jem'Hadar. It was a golden age. And we got our ass kicked. Or the Federation got his ass kicked in the war. You are absolutely right. Zelensky is absolutely screwed. He I think he played it wrong, and on some level gave Donald Trump a free hand to do what he wanted to do anyway, which is to cut aid and let them figure it out on its own. Europe has been
this gave Trump cover with the Republicans, who might have been a little bit doubtful about cutting Ukraine loose. It doesn't change anything with Democrats who don't like him anyway.
Right. But you got people like Lindsey Graham cutting bait. Lindsey Graham was like, if I talked to Zelensky 9 times, I talked to him that morning. I told him effectively just smile, eat crow, sign the deal.
And the sanctions are going away.
And the sanctions. I'm glad you brought that up. So Garland sent me this yesterday too. Damn, I can't find it. I'll find it. Garland sent me the link yesterday. I believe it was Reuters, effectively saying that Trump is talking about unraveling the sanctions and setting the Treasury Department and one of the other departments to go about doing it. So he is moving on multiple fronts. In one sense, it's, I'm going to bend Zelensky to form by making him suffer militarily, because he's...
Which, by the way, this is the way the Vietnam War ended. Americans don't know that. Congress cut off the funding. That was the end of it. Congress finally decided, I believe it was in 1973, but thereabouts, they just decided, we're not sending any more money over to South Vietnam. And that was it. I mean, they were ultimately, we withdrew, they were overrun, Vietnam was reunified. I mean, people forget, like Barack Obama justified repeatedly voting as a senator in favor of the Iraq war that he claimed to be against, saying like, well, we can't have our guys in the foxholes running out of bullets. It's like, well, Congress has done that before. And by the way, it doesn't happen like overnight. I mean, the Ukis have some stuff. They can keep going for a little while.
For a little while, maybe a month.
They can keep going. But I mean, yeah, they know. I mean, obviously, like, this is a problem.
They can't keep the lights on, can't pay the pensions.
And look, honestly, I don't really see, truly, objectively. I mean, look, I feel sorry for the Ukrainian people who've been caught in the crossfire here, and Russian people who've been caught also, particularly in Kursk. But I don't feel any sympathy for the Ukrainian government. I mean, what are we going to end up with? Putin's going to get everything he wanted. Well, what did he want, right? He wants the territory that is, Crimea and the Donbass. Well, frankly, those territories should never have been in Ukraine in the first place when the Soviet Union broke apart.
Russian.
The border should have been moved back. So the border wasn't in the right place. This solves the stupid border problem, right? The cartographers of the, Stalin's cartographers fucked up. And so this war resolved that issue. And then, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just true. And then also, like, you don't want a NATO power right on Russia's border because it could lead to an escalation of a stupid border conflict into World War III. So that's dangerous. I mean, it's like the Guns of August in 1914 that, Barbara Tushman, one asshole, some stupid archduke gets whacked, and then the next thing you know, everybody's killing each other. That could happen. And that's, I think NATO is it's really dangerous. It's not keeping anyone safe. NATO needs to go away. So again, and then they can join the EU. Ukraine can join the EU. That's good for Ukraine. It'll be good for Russia too, to have an EU trading partner right on their border. I mean, it's like, it works. It's a good settlement. I mean, it's not like they're asking for, Trump's asking for more from Ukraine than Putin is asking for. I mean, Putin's not asking for reparations.
He just wants a neutral entity on his border.
Literally the worst border in the world. When I have this discussion, like, people are like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, literally, okay, so you're the president of Russia, right? It's like that you have one border where one time, an army came across there and killed 28 million of your people. That's never happened anywhere else ever. So, like, if you have that border, you're worried about that border. If you're not worried about that border, you're an idiot.
By the way, Napoleon invaded Second World War. The First World War. Like, Ukraine has been the gateway into invading Russia multiple times. And you can imagine, if you're Russia, you would be very dodgy about your borders.
And last time it happened with the Germans, they were greeted as liberators by the locals. Again, that doesn't make the Russians warm and fuzzy thinking about that.
Especially West Ukraine, I thoroughly agree with you. I mean, he wants neutrality. And that's not an insane point of view. Ukraine was neutral.
The U.S. has that from Canada and Mexico. They're not our enemies.
Speaking of that, 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico go into effect today. And apparently he's upped the ante on China to 20% tariffs on China.
And also. China has retaliated, right?
And China's retaliating, and Mexico and Canada will also retaliate.
Yep, they will.
Apparently, this is also going to go into effect on Europe at some point, where when Starmer was here, they were like, hey, were you able to convince Trump not to put in tariffs? And Trump was like, nope. Nope, he was not. These tariffs are going into effect. What the hell? Give me a take on that. I mean, like, what do you think Trump's motivation is with this? I mean, I know what he's trying to do, meaning what he wants is to reshape the global order in regards to trade, where companies come back to the U.S., where they say, okay, fair enough. We can't make a buck if we stay here, so we're just going to move our business to the U.S. And Bloomberg pointed out some companies are doing that.
Well, I mean, I have long been an opponent of free trade agreements like NAFTA, WTO, GATT. I'm from, a part of the country that was absolutely devastated by that. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, total classic Rust Belt city. And I've long believed that if you want access to, the massive consumer market that the United States is, you should not have the right to hire workers overseas and then ship your cheaply made crap over to us and get top dollar from us. No. I mean, so I think that's what Trump has in mind. I mean, it hurts my brain because I agree with him on so many things. I mean, I'll tell you, that people are like, well, don't you have anything bad to say about him? Yeah, I don't like these tax cuts for the rich. I don't like, he should leave Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid the fuck alone. Doge is like out of control. The EPA should not be gutted. They should be expanded.
But he's
blah, blah, blah.
the opposition on global affairs versus domestic. It's weird.
That's right. Yeah, well, so that's the thing, is it must have really hurt people's brains in the 20s and 30s when the two parties realigned really dramatically. That's what we're seeing now, particularly on domestic matters. On foreign
Domestic,
affairs.
international,
On international stuff, it's like the Democratic and Republican parties have swapped. I mean, it's not like, I wouldn't say Trump is really a pacifist, but he's definitely, did you ever see that movie Dreamscape from 1980?
Yes.
So it's kind of a cool, weird old movie, and like the president of the United States has these dreams, and he's terrified of World War III, and he of bringing about World War III. He's haunted by that, and I keep thinking of that movie when I think of Donald Trump talking about you're flirting with World War III. I don't think any other president since the atomic bomb was invented has been haunted by that idea. Like, oh my God, we could, they worry about it, but they don't worry about it the way Donald Trump worries about it. Donald Trump is actually scared of World War III and nuclear weapons. And he's right to be. Yeah. And it's like, and he's willing to say so in public. I love that. I think I also love, he's not wrong. I mean, basically when he talked about you don't hold the cards. I want to answer your question really directly. I think what Trump is on about here is basically saying, like, the post-war order, a lot of it has involved the United States writing some big checks, right? And it started out logically, like with the Marshall Plan, like, we're going to rebuild Europe, but we're going to use our contractors, and we're going to open European markets to purchase American-made goods, and our people are going to go over there and with a strong dollar and vacation, and they're going to go to Paris and Rome, and it's going to be great, and it'll be cheap. And that post-war consensus continued after the devastating defeat in the Vietnam War, and we started having energy shocks in the 70s. And a growing disparity between rich and poor, which has stagnated economic growth in many respects in the United States, and yet we continued to pay. I'll get the check, another round on me for the whole world. Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, but listen, who's doing anything for us, right? And I think that's kind of like that economic nationalism. Trump is basically the guy who. It's kind of like, let me just stop this game of musical chairs and say, let's just look at where we are here. Yeah. We're still rich and powerful, militarily, economically, culturally. And I want to leverage that power to, have the best seat at the table, to ride in first class. And why should we be like, meanwhile, these Europeans are like eating out on our dime, and, they're not paying a fair share of their defense and blah, 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 blah. So he's like, fuck those people. And then those people are like, yeah, oh, Donald, we will not listen to you. So then he's like, okay, you won't listen to me. Fuck you. I'll make you listen. I will make you listen. I mean, and so he's like, that's what the tariffs are about. The tariffs are like, wake up, pay attention. We were serious. I wasn't bullshitting. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And
it's, God, I love so much of that, because your point of view is effectively like, look, we could be in a war, and these liberals don't seem to accept the reality of that.
No,
and not accepting the reality.
I want to be friends with Russia. I've been saying that for years, way before I ever heard of Donald Trump running for political office.
Yeah, it's like, why are we doing this? That's the way I keep looking at this. Why are we at odds with all of these countries like that?
Yeah, we were friends with them. We were allies until Truman fucked it up, and why?
And just so the audience would know what you're referring to when Donald Trump is pointing out the nuclear war thing, and he's right, because when you have somebody like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris in, I'll give you an example. When I was at the network, and there was this question about whether or not Russia was going to go in, nobody believed it at the network. Like, nobody, no American believed that Russia was going to go in.
I didn't.
And did you?
I did not believe it.
Yeah, I didn't believe it either.
I thought it was American propaganda.
I did too. And we had to eat so much crow that day when it came on air.
Oops.
And the thing was, I had to ask myself, well, why didn't we believe that they were going to go in? And I had to make a Star Trek reference, Deep Space Nine, Cisco, where he has a conversation with the Federation. And the Federation is like, hey, everything's great. What's your issue? Why are you freaking out? Why are you being this animated? Just calm down. Just chill out. And when they leave, Cisco flips out and he's like, they don't understand. They don't understand. They're living in paradise. They're living in paradise. People are not living in paradise out here. People are struggling. They're trying to make ends meet. They're fighting. They're scraping. They live in paradise, so they don't quite get it. I think it's that. We live in the U.S. There are no enemy at our gates. There's nobody trying to knock down our borders. There's nothing like that. Europe is in a similar space, regardless of all of the yelling and everything else. The reality of it is, in their minds, they're not living in that world where there is something pressing on their borders where a choice needs to be made. Do we get involved to stop it or not? Meaning, a country that has been invaded, where they lost 28 million people in that second invasion, tens of millions in the first invasion, the Napoleonic Wars. This is a country that has been under constant military pressure, and they are not fucking around. Meaning, when Russia is looking at this and they're saying, hey, you guys blew off the Minsk agreements. Hey, we need to come to some kind of agreements. Here's my idea for security architecture. And they say, you don't get a security architecture. You don't get security guarantees. You don't get to dictate to us what you need in regards to security arrangements. Okay, you guys are killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the Donbass. You're on our border. Shut up. You don't get a say. Okay. And they invade. We as Americans don't get like the full gravity of what was taking place in a way where we can fully get it from flesh to bone, where we'll be like, he'll invade. So our take was, this is propaganda. They're not going to do it. The question becomes, okay, well, what's the alternative to invading? There isn't one. Like, either they're going to let Ukraine become part of NATO and expand to the border of Russia, or Russia stops it. Those are your only two options. They are not stopping. They are brain dead and taking on this notion of NATO expansion almost as an act of God or act of faith, like it's cosmic. Russia either allows a hostile military actor on the border or they don't.
Right.
For whatever reason, we don't get that. Like, that doesn't entirely sink into us until it did.
Because we're completely, as a political culture, incapable of looking at things from another point of view.
Yes.
I don't know why that is.
With the gravity
it just is.
Yeah. So this is Trump effectively saying, okay, these liberals are out of their minds and they will keep pushing and pushing and pushing, even to the point of nuclear war, because they're living in a fantasy land, as opposed to the reality that I am trying to impose on Zelensky and into Europe. This is your point when Trump points out, we are pushing, you are flirting with nuclear war. And by the way, Europe is, because these stupid idiots are still trying to put out a plan what America is the backstop.
Talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to
count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean. You don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You
God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very
You will
good.
feel influence.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From
it.
the very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I
You don't
was
have
in
the cards right now. With us, you start
I'm
having
not playing
cards. But
cards.
right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you
You're
think about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
It's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
I'm wearing
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No. In this
That's my president. That's my president. That's my president. That's what, when I watched that, that's what I thought. That's my president. Good job. Do that to Netanyahu, please.
Oh,
That's what I wanted, right? But in that moment, that is my president.
And I don't know what's going on between Bibi and Donald, but I suspect it's not the same, right? It's not the same dynamic. But I do suspect there are disagreements. I have no reason to say that.
I think all things being equal, Trump probably wants the ceasefire to last. Even if he backs Netanyahu to the hill, he probably wants it to last. I guess my thing with that is an intervention. And that is him pointing out, dude, you are trying to entangle the United States into a third world war. You trying to get into NATO is trying to bring the world to the brink of a third world war.
I've already decided how this is going to end. And this isn't a negotiation. Not between you and me. This is what's what. You're going to agree or fuck off.
And he's at the fuck off stage. He's at the fuck off stage. I love this. I've never heard a president do this. And what I mean by that is to be like, look, we are playing around with countries with all of the nuclear or most of the nuclear weapons in the world. We have at the point where we're firing missiles into Russia, and Russia has fired off the Orezhnik as an example and a warning that this can happen to European capitals. Why are we continuously pushing in a direction where we've lost? Meaning, not only have we lost the war, the only thing that you can get out of this is a nuclear war that would change the context on the ground. We need to acknowledge that and move forward. And Europe is like, we don't want to acknowledge that. Zelensky is sitting here. I don't want to acknowledge that. So Donald Trump said, okay, fair enough. Handle it on your own. Figure it out.
And if they could figure it out, I don't even understand really what, from the European standpoint, besides the benefit of selling more weapons, what is the point of this, of continuing this conflict? I mean, what could Ukraine possibly get from continuing it? Are they going to recapture a substantial amount of territory? No. So what is there to be gained? I mean, this is going to go on.
Cognitively associated themselves with the war, like Joe Biden. Like, is there any situation that Joe Biden could walk away after we're with you for as long as it takes? It's $300 billion. Ukraine was unprovoked war of aggression. Like, you spend 3 years breathing, inhaling that, explaining that to your populations, and getting your local populations to suffer under that argument. And not just suffer under that argument. If you look at the businesses in Germany that were collapsing, the businesses in Europe, they were going belly up because they couldn't afford the energy costs. And then you turn around and say, okay, now let's end the war. How do you do that? Like, if you're Macron, if you're Starmer, if you're one of these other idiots, Schultz, that decided that you were going to fuck over your own local populations for Ukraine under this model, Ukraine is a democracy. Ukraine is a beacon of light. All of this nonsense. How do you walk back?
It's very hard. You know, I guess I didn't think I was going to mention de Gaulle twice in this broadcast, but you know, the way you would do it, and it's very rare, right? Most of the time when a country has a failed war, there has to be a change of power, a new ruler comes in, a new president or whatever, and that's Trump. And so that's clearly what's happened here. De Gaulle, he's an exception. He was a huge proponent of of Algeria being in France, very militantly so. And then, you know, the Algerian resistance and independence movement was very radical and very violent. And at some point he went to visit Algeria, and he came back completely chastened by what he saw. No propaganda tour. He was like, oh, they don't want us there. And,
he got reality.
Things got real. So he went on French national television and radio, I think this was 1962, and he just said, look, I was wrong. I was such a proponent of French Algeria. I believed that Algeria should be French forever. You know, it was a province of France. It was completely part of France, like Hawaii is part of the United States. It wasn't just a colony. And he was like, nevertheless, you know, like, I was mistaken. We're getting out of Algeria. We're going to help the new Algerian independence government with training and money so that, like, there's a smooth transition and they do okay after we're gone. And their people were so pissed at him that like his own generals tried to assassinate him. It's the Day of the Jackal is like a fictionalized version of those assassination attempts, which were all the time. His own military was constantly trying to kill him. And so, because they were so pissed, they viewed him as a traitor for that. But that's what you do, right? That's the point. The fact that it's hard and, and it's an exception is, makes your point. Basically, nobody does that. How do you admit, how could, Johnson knew that the war in Vietnam was lost, but he couldn't order the withdrawal. Nixon could do it, but only later.
Yeah. They are in a fantasy land. That's my take. Like they are just,
and they don't want to admit that,
and they don't want to admit it, and so they keep pushing Trump over and over. And then they have this mineral deal that's not a mineral deal.
Also, they want to keep fucking with the Russians. It's not about Ukraine winning. They don't care about that. It's about fucking with the Russians.
And they believe that they could do so at a distance and using the U.S. as a backstop to do so. I mean,
it's the Brzezinski thing all over again.
Yep.
In Afghanistan.
It's wild to me. Give me your take. When you saw the sanction thing, so right here, Trump administration weighs lifting sanctions on Russia. The possible plans are reportedly part of the president's effort to improve ties with Moscow and in the Ukraine conflict. Now, he is doing this outside of anything going on with Zelensky and outside of anything going on with Europe.
Yep.
Meaning it's almost like he's working on multiple cylinders.
Right.
The White House has directed the state and treasury departments to draft proposals for easing certain sanctions on Russia, Reuters reported on Monday, citing sources familiar with the matter. The tentative plans would align U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to improve diplomatic and economic relations with Moscow and facilitate an end to the conflict in Ukraine. The proposed sanction relief could include specific Russian entities and individuals, including some business leaders, according to the outlet. The list will be discussed with Russian representatives in the coming days as part of the administration's broad talks with Moscow on repairing ties, sources told Reuters. Now, Ritter, and I would say even Garland, is very bullish on this. I don't know what they think about this.
I'm bullish, but I'm cautiously optimistic by nature. Good things often tend not to happen. But I think, and look, I mean, this is just an initial preparation, right? I mean, there has to be so they have to prepare it. They have to finesse it. They have to then decide whether they're going to enact those sanctions relief as a goodwill gesture before they negotiate with Russia.
They do not sell it.
I probably, knowing the Russians, I think the right approach would be to just do it as a good faith gesture, and Russians will appreciate that. Things don't have to be in that strict Anglo-Saxon quid pro quo, repo man switching, the keys for the money. It doesn't have to be like that. Russians are different. Honor is more of a concept there. But it depends on how they decide to put. I mean, I'd say it looks good. I mean, the only thing that I think could fuck it up would be I know these are viewed as two discrete issues, but if the Europeans somehow gum up the works, oh, we're going to come through for Ukraine, we're going to give them, but then it's okay, then Europe's deciding to say fuck the United States. I don't know if they're prepared to go that far. And anyway, will it stick? Well, it's not going to stick in 3 years when Marine Le Pen is the prime minister, is the president of France, which she will be. It's not going to stick when Keir Starmer is gone, which could be next week. And
by the way, Marine Le Pen just gave a speech and pointing out saying Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. This is outrageous. You're going to get us into a war.
Right.
And she literally just gave that speech.
And she's right. I mean, obviously, that's just sanity. And so all of those clowns in Western Europe, they're going to have to get real, and you can't listen, you can't worry about the Poles who are crazy. So I don't know. I mean, I think it looks good. I'd say, it's 80%. Those sanctions are going to go away.
I think they're going to go away, and I think they're going to go away not because Trump loves Russia. I think Trump realizes that the American dollar is under threat if we keep going this way. Yeah. And what I mean by that is at the point where they decided we're going to take Russia off the SWIFT system, we're going to steal $300 billion. We're going to sanction everything to hell and high heaven. And
Yeah,
none of it
freedom.
worked.
Freedom is another word for nothing left to lose, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happened to, but what Biden did to the Russians. They had nothing to lose. They no longer had any economic interests vested in the West. And they're like, all right, so we turn east. We've got a big country. We've got, we'll open up ties with China and India. And they did.
And we need to get rid of the dollar. And
right. Yeah, because that dollar's been a pain in our ass.
Yeah, Putin. I remember Putin made the speech. He says the United States spent $10 trillion on a war, and they just made it out of thin air. Yeah. And that is unheard of. Like, because from his take, if you can do that, where you can materialize money, then you can build up a military as big as you want. Mm-hmm. You can use that money for economic leverage as much as you want, because you're just making it out of thin air.
Yeah, like, so this is about saving the Bretton Woods system.
Yeah,
that's what this is about. And and Trump's smart enough to see that. I mean, obviously, look, we're in an age of globalization, right? Well, you want as many friends as you can possibly get, and the best friends are the big friends. And Russia's a big friend. Yeah. I mean, on that Monopoly board, it's maybe not Boardwalk, but it might be Park Place. It's not Mediterranean. And Ukraine is more like Mediterranean Avenue.
Yeah,
it's like
$60.
Who cares, right? Like, whatever. Yeah. Like, we can do without Ukraine. I mean,
right.
At all. Like, what if Russia takes all of Ukraine? So
man,
they used to have it.
Properties can be biting, though, man. I used to buy that shit up in a heartbeat because it bites. Like, if you keep hitting it over and over. Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're totally right. I mean, you're talking about a country that is what, number 5 now, or 4 or 5. I mean, they surpassed Germany and Japan as in regards to the leading economies, and this is after massive sanctions from Europe and the United States.
Yeah.
And
like anybody who's been to Russia, like, which I have, like 2 years
ago. I've never been. I'm so jealous of you all.
2 years ago. I mean, it's and like, I'm paying for everything with cash, right? The only effect of the sanctions is that, like, Starbucks is closed.
Yeah.
Okay? But next door, there's like an equivalent, like, Robots. Russian, beautiful Russian cafe, nicer, better than Starbucks, better coffee. And it's business is going gangbusters, right?
With candelabras.
So it's like totally like, it's like that. Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. Tara Reid is current. I'm on her social media, and she's in Russia now, and she's like, "Oh yeah, there's no economic effect," and she's right. I believe her. I mean, Russia's doing fine, and the thing is, Putin and the Russian government, they knew that this kind of thing could happen years ago. And they started to plant to sanctions-proof the Russian economy back in the 20 years ago. So they're prepared. I mean, Americans are idiots, really, truly. I would love to be. I really, truly hope. I mean, look, the key here is really step one. Like, normalize relations with Russia, right? Step one, bring up some economic ties, but we should have some cultural exchanges. I mean, if more Americans went to Russia and more Russians came here, we got to know each other, all this Cold War bullshit would go away.
I'm curious, what is your hook into Russia on this? I think I know mine. I think mine was chess. Like, when I was growing up playing chess, the stuff that I studied was from Russians. Like, if you're like, from Soviet era, where you're thinking of like Alkaline, Tal, Botnevik, like all of these, like the Petrosian, these masters of the game. And, there was a movie on Queen's Gambit.
Yes.
On HBO. Oh, it is so good. She is so attractive. And she was so good. The person who she's representing is not American, though. It's a Georgian woman. Mm-hmm. And it's like, as you listen to that, and she went to the Soviet Union, and you had the US effectively feeding her propaganda that she did not care about. And she was there. And there was this kind of interesting dynamic of her being a part of this culture, accepting it for what it is, and yet not necessarily attending to this kind of geopolitical stuff that's taking place around her. And the thing with chess, the geopolitical part of it was always built into it. I mean, Alkaline doing propaganda for the Germans. some people on a bus get picked up because they have chess notation and the cop thinks that they're spies. Russia using it as their way of saying this is how much smarter we are than the rest of the world because they just dominated on the chess scene. It is fascinating. Like, but that was my hook into it. If I look back into it and I think to myself, okay, why am I open in this way? Why do I not feed into the propaganda that typically comes out of my country? Or why do I not feel like the 80% that distrusts Russia as a just basis of operation? I think it's that, at least for me, at least I think it was. What do you think your hook was into this?
For me, it was, so I was born in 1963. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, I was almost 30 years old. And so for me, I grew up in the Cold War, duck and cover, the whole 9 yards. And first of all, I got very interested in communism and Marxism as a teenager. And so obviously the Soviet Union was the dominant, the Comintern, everything, they were the vanguard of the global international communist movement. So, and that leads you into Russian culture inevitably, because it was, Russia was the dominant republic of the former USSR. And then, I started, the more I was, anything that you're told repeatedly, so think about my point of view. I'm 5 years old, learning how to read in 1968, Tet Offensive, the assassinations, race riots in the cities, all that stuff. So then Watergate when I'm 10, and basically the U.S. government's been completely discredited as a bunch of lying sacks of shit who lied us into Vietnam, overthrew violent overthrow of democratically elected governments around the world, the CIA, all that stuff. It was all coming out. So, so when these assholes are basically talking shit about the Soviet Union, it naturally makes me think, could it be that maybe they're lying about this as well? And so then I started investigating, and everything I learned my father was really interesting. He was a right winger. He was a creature of the Cold War. He was high ranking U.S. Air Force guy. And he was as far right wing Republican as you could possibly get. And when he told me, he's like, it's all a lie about we have to spend a lot of money on the military to catch up with them. It's the other way around. They're spending a lot of money to keep up with us.
The missile gap.
The arms race is we're causing it. And this is a guy who's he spent his entire life working for the U.S. military and for defense contractors, and he's a right winger. And he's so if he's saying that, then it's true. It's take it to the bank, right? And so, then I met people who'd been, and then I got the opportunity to go as an adult, and I went right before the collapse and right after the collapse, and I really I like Russians. I like the Russian language. I'm not really good with languages. I had real trouble taking Spanish in college, but somehow Russian I take to it. So I don't know. It's it's just sort of it's not something I planned or anything. Yeah. But my mom also learned Russian, and she talked a lot about. She was a polyglot. She taught herself Russian out of this ridiculous book called Russian Made Simple, and she could talk to Russian people. She talked 7 languages. She was ridiculous. Are you serious? So she could speak fluent German, Spanish, Russian, even German, which is a bitch to learn. So anyway, so
that's a harsh sounding language.
Yeah, it sure is. Russian's amazing because it's got all the roughness of German, but all the softness of French, of a romance. It can do both.
Yeah, it's funny when you ask people what's the harshest language, it comes back German. But I think it's because of Hitler. Because when they think of German, they think of Hitler losing his mind. Right?
Well, Cantonese is not exactly a very pleasant sounding language either.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of Vietnamese. I gotta be honest, I wasn't a fan. When I was there, I wasn't a fan of the language. I'm not going to do that. I was about to do I was like, it sounds like this. It sounds like that to me, right? It doesn't sound like
Chinese
that to
people say that Cantonese sounds like chickens talking.
Yeah. Okay, we're being pretty brutal as Americans, right? Yeah. But it's just the way it sounds to us. It's not for example, I love German language from women
Mm.
in Austria, because
Hmm.
they speak German also, but it sounds different when women say it. I don't know how to explain it. Annalita Baerbock is an exception. She's a lunatic. But my ex, I love the way she talks. I love the way she talks. I'm a sucker for it. Ted, I'm going to let you go because we are coming to the end of the show. I mean, the end of the hour. Man, I always appreciate these conversations. I always learn so much from you. You're such a learned man. Like your understanding and knowledge of history always blows me away. I always fascinated by it, and I always appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. Appreciate it. I love coming on anytime.
Oh man, thank you.
You're fun to talk to.
Have a good
one. Come to New York
Rall.
and let's come. You can stay at my place. Let's hang.
You know what? I might take you up on that. I'm homeless right now, so.
So I hear. Yeah, so come up for a few days. Yeah, my kid's in college. His room's available.
I might take you up on that just for a day or so.
I'm on the Upper West Side. You know, it's easy. Take the train to Penn Station.
See, I always loved going to Chess Park in New York.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, I love it. I remember
Washington Square Park.
Yeah, Washington Square Park. I remember this guy said, "Yeah, let's play." He wanted to play for money. Okay, fair enough. I mean, at the time, I'm a monster at the game. I played like master level at Blitz at the time.
Those guys are insane. They're so fast.
Yeah, I destroyed that guy. And he's like, "You didn't tell me you were a titled player." I was like, "Well, I'm not a titled player. I just, I can play." But that's irrelelament.
It's so New York. He's pissed that he lost.
Yeah, but you're sitting over the chessboard trying to play people for money. How are you?
That's what that can happen. You can lose.
It's part of the game. I could.
The hustler met the hustler.
Yeah, but Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI, Too Much Information. It starts at 10 a.m. Check him out immediately after the show goes off with the great, the one and only, the beautiful, the awesome Manila Chan. Ted, have a good one, man. Be safe.
You too. See you later. Have a good rest of the show.
All right. Thanks, man. All right. We have come to another break. I would like to beseech, request that you like the show, hit the like button. You can support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, all of those things. All of those things will be read, providing they're not sexist, racist, or bigoted. All of them dramatically helps the show. These shows are often demonetized, so what you give essentially keeps this content going, and you have my deepest appreciation for it. I would like to bring in my next guest again, another favorite of the show. It seems like I only bring on favorites. Kofi Kaku. He is African analyst, senior research fellow for the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Kofi, welcome back, man. How you doing today? You doing all right? Wait, I can't hear you. Say it one more time. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Volume. But there's something going on with the
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now I can hear you. There you are.
Yes, sorry, it was my fault. I didn't have the mic on. It was mute.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. How you doing today, man? You doing all right?
Doing really well. The weather here is pretty nice. It's been raining for a while, but today is very sunny, very bright.
Here.
And,
you're in South Africa, correct?
Yes, I'm in what's called Pretoria, or Tswane in local language.
Okay. So one of the things that apparently has taken place is Donald Trump has killed U.S. aid. And there's, correct me if I'm wrong, a conversation in South Africa about the fact that Trump has killed U.S. aid. What is going on with this in South Africa? Because look, my take on U.S. aid is we use this stuff for regime change. I accept that there may be a portion of it that goes towards helping, whether it's feeding or something else. But we use it to overthrow governments. We use it to overthrow Ukraine. We use it to put pressure on Georgia. We use it to screw around in Romania. So I am decisively negative on the usage of U.S. aid, especially if it's going to be used in that way. How is it used in South Africa?
Well, I mean, I would agree with you. Many of us have seen the kind of information that came about on USAID. It's sort of a hodgepodge, as much as many of us had benefited a bit from USAID in the old days. But when the truth came out, it was quite a shock to many people who benefit from it, especially people in the health area, like the PEPFAR, the president thing in the US, to deal with HIV/AIDS and so forth. And the health area has been really hit hard. So at first it was quite a shock. It's still a shock. However, very slowly, you could hear people, not just nationalists or Pan-Africans, but people who have a sense of sovereignty, start to come out of the very tough narrative and say, wait a minute, you better take care of yourself, have your own money. There's plenty of money in South Africa. I mean, the amount of money that was sent from USA, it's just some money that you could use, you could find in South Africa in your budget. And in fact, very quickly, the Treasury here, Treasury Department, has been making some really sound, proposal, rational ones, saying that they will be able to take care of that. So I think the shock is still there. The only thing is, from most of our governing leaders, they always react, and they react very slowly. So many people might suffer from this sort of shock, and then say, okay, what do we get the ARV medicine, and what kind of support we need? So that's the only concern, really. If not, in terms of money, the South African government will just come very quickly and fill that vacuum very quickly. But it does have impact on other things as well. All kinds of other aids have been frozen. They're not coming anymore. But many of us are saying, wait a minute, it's time that Africans have a sense of the real sovereignty, and not having what I call, I've shared that with you before, it's what I call the begging bowl syndrome. Now, the golden begging bowl syndrome, where the beggar is begging with a golden bowl, doesn't realize that he's got a bowl, and that he's got more than what he's really looking for. So he must reset his mental mindset to say, wait a minute, I'm wealthy enough. Why am I in the begging bowl business?
Yeah.
So that syndrome is still there. And I think to a certain degree, I was talking to a colleague this afternoon here in South Africa, and he's just saying, wait a minute, I think President Trump, to a certain degree, as much as he looked a little bit reckless and somehow, very bullish on things and bullying people, he must be, or might be, if we look at it very closely, a very helpful guy to Africa. And I think slowly things are moving to that point where people are saying, we can take care of ourselves. Thanks for all the things you've done to us, the United States, all these days. But I think we're going to look into it for ourselves now.
I'm curious on Trump from other perspectives. Like, how is South Africa looking at Trump? I mean, granted, Elon Musk is the lackey in the background. He's South African. I suspect he may have certain ideas about. Let me explain what I mean. I met a guy once. Well, I guess these are two questions. Let me go to the first question first. How does South Africa view him? Like, from an external point of view, looking at the United States, what is the impression of the U.S. from South Africa, especially with Trump in power?
I would say there are many views. The three that I've noticed as an observer, the majority of the views really see him as somebody who really seemed to be focusing on his country,
Yeah.
America first, very important, is isolating himself from the rest of the world and pulling away from most of these international global organizations that tend to stifle, the progress of most countries. And they're saying, wait a minute, what is he doing? Is he pulling out the UN, the World Bank as well, the IMF, and all these institutions, World Health Organization, perhaps UNESCO again, and so forth. So this sort of distancing is just a little bit of concern from many people who've seen the US as a sort of a very outgoing nation that had a lot of relationship with the rest of the world. I mean, that was what justified the hegemonic power of the US. But people are now also realizing that that hegemonic sort of hard power has really been brutalized many countries, destroy them, creating all sorts of chaos that made many countries not really live up to what they're supposed to be living up to. Well-being, peace in the countries, decent democratic institutions, and then of course, freedom to do what they're supposed to do, and who they're supposed to be. And these parts are really, it's not confusing to people. People are now saying, hey, they've got this guy. And they also have an early picture of President Trump when he was, I think, 45, number 45 in the US, President 45. He never visited the country, and he made some disparaging comment that I'm not going to try to repeat here. But to a certain degree, people took a seat back again and said, wait a minute, he seemed to have a point, because this continent should have been working better if we didn't have those leaders who are kowtowing to, these imperialists. Of course, you also got to attribute the fault to his country and the Europeans. But people are saying, he may have a point. Our leaders must get their act together, fix things like water, schools, infrastructure. I mean, the basic necessity of a functioning modern state. Our leaders are struggling with this, electricity. I mean, here's you get this huge African continent, and then you have another country, China, which is about 3 times smaller than Africa, and it's getting its act right. It's a leader in energy, 10 years ahead of most countries in the world. So what you might want to probably do as an African leader is say, wait a minute, China, how did you do that? Can you help us fix these things? Yeah. But nothing, So people are looking at these kind of things, but they're doing a bit of comparative analysis. But most important, many are happy that the United States will leave Africa alone, so that they're meddling, they're sort of getting into putting a regime change and so forth, may not come as strong as they used to come in the old days. I think that's a part of the relief, but we're not quite sure yet with Trump, because we don't know what he's going to do in the next couple 4 years. But there also a small group of South Africans, South African whites, the Afrikaners, some of the Afrikaners of AfriForum or Solidarity, those lobbying groups who have been pushing their, influence peddling in Washington. I think one of the, defunct leaders just now had a meeting and met with Tucker Carlson for more than an hour, an interview. I mean, the kind of things he was saying there. There's a bit of truth, but overall, there's so many displaced and misplaced things that he was saying that it gives South Africa a very strange picture.
Yeah, explain that, because Tucker Carlson has a huge footprint, and if he's having an interview, and look, Tucker Carlson, even he is problematic, even though he gets things right. Like, for example, one of the things behind the scenes during January 6th, he says something like, white men shouldn't act this way. It's like, what? What? It's like, I have a higher opinion of white men as opposed to acting this way. Or recently, in one of his interviews, he says something like, hey, what's wrong with white people having a state of their own? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? That's a weird thing to say, right? It's like, it's like people say the N-word. I remember one of the, they were talking to African-American, and he says, yeah, but why can't white people say the N-word? And the guy was like, you want to say it? He's like, no. Well, you clearly sound like you want to say it. It feels like that, right? Where it's like the very fact that you're saying, why can't white people just have a place where we could just be white? Feels super weird to me. Yeah. But that's the stuff that Tucker Carlson says. So it's not shocking that Tucker Carlson will have a white Afrikaner on the show saying outlandish stuff. So I just want to preface with that. What was he saying? And give me your response to it, because I didn't see the interview.
My take, I just got turned off by the beginning of the show, so I struggled to get through it. So the first 5 minutes or so, I'm like, let me listen to this again. I'm going to listen to this again, but I just couldn't go through it because Tucker is so poorly educated about South Africa. Right. And then the race issue that took place, and the brutal race issue of apartheid that took place in this country. And it doesn't seem like these people have a sense of pain, a legacy of pain that Black people are still carrying on their backs every day. They don't have that sense.
They don't.
And that sort of, they need some sensitivity training, per se, to a certain degree, to be able to understand the story and have some kind of compassion for Black people who've been treated like animals for 400 years. This is a huge burden on the back of people in their DNA. So when a small group of people trying to flip the script and make people believe that, oh, by the way, we're now, and that's what Tucker was saying, that, white people are under now racism. They're suffering from racism in Africa. I mean, you just sit down and say, wait a minute. Is Tucker really real about what he's saying? And you understand, if you've been an observer or somebody who's lived there for a while, or many years, like I have for 30 years or so, that he just doesn't, he's uneducated, but at the same time, he doesn't have the sort of sentiment to understand the pain people have gone through and what they carry. And all these, there's so many trigger moments when a white person goes on social media, Twitter and X, and then just attacks Black people without context. It's just painful for many people. They'll spend a week on it, right? So the guy was being interviewed by Tucker, his name, I think, Ernst Woods. He used to belong to, I think, AfriForum, and he resigned 10 days or a week or 2 weeks ago. And for some reason, I think they've been under pressure. And in fact, there's mounting pressure against them. There's a petition that's been going on this past week to take these two organizations, sort of Afrikaner white minority group influence, to a case of treason.
Really?
And yes, a serious one. But it's going to be a bit tough, because a case of treason, there are a couple of elements that makes it a little bit tricky to pull these guys and then sort of charge them with it. And they have very
treason. Treason usually indicates that they're working with a foreign country against their own.
Exactly. That's the first one, that you would consort with a foreign power to overthrow the power of your own country. And one part of that is that this group of Afrikaners have asked the United States to come after the African national leaders, African National Congress leaders. That's a form of overthrow. To deal with them. They have a point in the sense that there are many things that are not working, corruptions are not, so nobody's dealing with the people who are being corrupt enough. But they're taking it the wrong way. They need to find another way, but not call Trump to come with the guns and get rid of them.
Right.
Yes, because that's the kind of mentality they have. They sort the problem by the barrel of the gun.
Oh, that's outrageous.
So a little bit outrageous, but they have, from time to time, they tend to have a point when things are not working, basic things that the African National Congress should be sorting out, And this is where, many of us are saying, wait a minute, let's listen to these people. What do they have to say? But I think they went overboard for that.
Kofi, go into that for me. I don't understand. The African National Congress had 30 years. They had the full support of the public. They were the vanguards of the revolution in regards to eliminating the apartheid state of South Africa.
And majority in parliament, by the way.
And overwhelming majority in parliament. Mm-hmm. Why haven't, meaning they've had absolute power to fix these items. Why haven't they?
Well, I mean, there are many explanations, but the one thing that I've come up to talk about now is there is a sense, when you study human beings, and then that's why psychology is very important, the understanding of human beings. And it seems those who are fighting, they're fighting for an ideal for which thousands of people died for. And those who managed to survive, for some reason, when they came back home, they just couldn't resist the attraction of the material lives that the white people were living. It's like you have slaves and say, I want to live like a master. And so in that journey of making the transition between the hard lives outside, I mean, think about it, Jamal, that you've been roaming around the world for 20 or 30 years. You don't know where your memories are. You've been, you almost, you're traumatized.
Yeah.
And when you come home, you have a place now where you can stay. And so things like having a big home, indulging in entertainments, that you're not at war anymore. They relax, they become lazy, and they forget about the priorities of what the ideals, the governing ideals that got them to fight to liberate this country was about. And so they got wealthy, very quickly wealthy, and using their money for not the real priorities. I mean, one of them that we talked about all the time is that over 30 years, there's only been 2 public universities built in this country. Jamal, unbelievable. And you could build many of these universities with just 1 or 2 billion rand, because the AfriForum people in Solidarity has already demonstrated that. In fact, next to where I live here, there's a little practical technical university called Soltech, built at 200 million rand. And it was supposed to be built at 300 million rand. The Afrikaners organized themselves. They went to their members, about 274 or so members. They went 74,000. They asked them, they said, look, please donate 10 rand, that's the South African currency, or a little bit more. They managed to combine that, and they put a project together to build that technical university, not only under budget, but also about, before the deadlines of that construction. And they are now, it's not the only one, they're building another one, much bigger. So they're organizing themselves and they're making things happen. So to answer your question, you ask yourself, there are at least 20 billionaires among the Black people, South Africans, at least. Some of them are visible, others are quiet, who can put some serious resources and then do something to change the nature of the challenges they have. They have 5 big challenges for me. The 3 that are the big challenges in the country that are well known is extreme poverty, that's one. The other one is extreme inequalities. As you know, we talk about this all the time. South Africa is among, if not the most unequal country in the world. Top in the Gini coefficient, that's about 0.67 or 0.68. That's really high. And then, of course, you have unemployment, very high among the youth who are coming from universities and so forth. They can't find anything. And the other one is the crime level. Last week, the crime stats came out, and people are very suspicious of the low level of crime because they can see what they're going through. But it's very concerning. And then, of course, the last one, the 5th one, is the nature of corruption, and people are worried about it. In fact, it was part of the conversation last week when the budget speech by the minister of Treasury was canceled or postponed for this coming week. The African National Congress wants to raise taxes on the wealthy, of course, but that's a general attitude, to raise on the wealthy, very quote unquote, people call it leftist approach and so forth. Like Joseph Stiglitz will agree with that. Paul Krugman also would agree with that. A little bit less, but at the heart of it is say, the South African government is short in the budget. They're not collecting enough taxes. This is very strange for a country so wealthy. And so the question is, if you're going to raise this, the rate you're raising it, not you think you're raising it on the wealthy, but it's going to have an impact on even the middle class and the poor people. Find another way. There's plenty of money. So the debate now is around the idea of saying, okay, is it about raising taxes or, mitigating or reducing the expenses of the government? South Africa, listen to this, according to the late Minister of Treasury and Department of Finance, South Africa has 29,000 millionaires in the civil servant being paid. Let me say it again, 29,000 millionaires. So civil servants making over R1 million.
Wait. Wait. I'm sorry, that just sunk in. Civil servants making over R1 million rand.
Yes. Which means they're getting paid. That's part of the salary, and then of course they pay taxes. Many of them don't realize that they're millionaires, Jamal, because they can't figure out what it means. You can double check it.
No, I'm just looking up what
former Treasury Minister Tito Mboweni, Minister of Finance.
Okay, so that's $53,836 a year. That's like $50,000 a year in the States.
But in terms of a reference point for us, it's $1 million.
That's $1 million. You're right.
It's more
Right.
than $1 million, and people don't have that kind of money here so easily. So
I
you
see.
ask
Okay,
yourself,
fair enough. Because when I see
yeah.
that, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's decent.
So the
It's
point,
not-
yeah.
yeah.
So the point here is it about collecting money or seeing what the money that you've already collecting is having the desired impact that you've set yourself up in the state of the national address when you're doing your strategy and so forth. And this is where the debate is, and the Democratic Alliance, sort of all white party largely, is putting the pressure. And they seem to have a point to a certain degree, because they're saying, even if you were to collect this VAT money, VAT money, you're going to misspend it on priorities that are not really, we've got about, I think, 41 ministers. That includes the head ministers and then deputy ministers, and people are now debating if they should change the constitution to get rid of deputy ministers, because this is another money flowing for nothing. What do you need the deputy minister for? You already have a director general after the minister and a deputy minister. They can deal with that. And much of it is just the state. It's just balloon with civil servants that to be paid.
Yeah.
And most of them are not capable enough. I'm not saying it. The report from the African National Congress has said it many times. Government reports have said it. So people are trying to figure out, how do we get not just more money, but how do we get a sensible, inclusive budget that is really going to have the desired impact?
Kofi,
but of course, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm beginning to think the problem with South Africa is a problem everywhere. Like, it's not specific to South Africa.
I agree.
Same thing in the U.S. Same thing in the U.S.
I agree.
It's
I've been hearing your talk with Ted Rall, but with other people.
Yeah.
How in the world can a democratic country like the United States can allow the Pentagon not to be audited for years and years and years, and doesn't even know where 2 or 3 trillion went up in smoke? It's unaccountable for. It's unbelievable.
It's astonishing. They can't pass a budget.
Okay.
They can't pass an audit. And it's
Yeah.
like you spend $1 trillion a year. And you're like, okay, well, you're spending more than the next 9 countries combined. And we are not at war. Like, this is not even a situation where we're at like in an active war spending this money. This is just money going out into the black, into the ether. And we do it year after year after year. $10 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. We got nothing for that. And it's like, that money is just being burned on the White House lawn. And you're thinking of bridges, roads, you're thinking of people who are in poverty. You think, I think of my grandmother who needed health care that we had to pay out of pocket for, that we couldn't afford. Like, I think of that. And so when I hear you talk about this in South Africa, it sounds very familiar. It's very important.
Well, look, we have about, I know according to numbers, they may have changed, but there are more than 40 million people under poverty in the United States. In South Africa, it's close to half. About 1 out of 5 people go to bed without food every night and every day. This is just shocking for a country so wealthy, South Africa.
And South Africa is like the leading country economy in Africa, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah. So that really, you got 17 million or so who are 17 or 19 million people who are under some kind of grant. So they get 350 or 500 or something, and it's changing all the time. And the shocking thing again last year is that the parliament and the government, they say, yeah, we're going to give old people a raise. And you know how much they give them for a raise?
How much?
10 rand.
That's it. See, they pull that nonsense here for Social Security too. They say, we're going to give you a raise. And it's like $5. And it's like, thanks.
Exactly.
It's like that.
It's more than an insult, and for a country so wealthy. So there's some kind of need to get a hold of the treasury, figure out where the money is going, who is just spending that money on what. This year the government's come out again with another huge, well, at least that's what the president was saying in his State of the Nation address, something like 900 billion for infrastructure. He said the same last year. He said the same for the year before. He said the year before. But we don't know where this money is going because we don't see the visual impacts of what this money is doing on the ground, saving people, helping them get rid of poverty and so forth.
Kofi, man, I am always illuminated by these conversations. We don't get to talk about Africa enough. So I love when you come here and we can have these conversations. Kofi Kaku is an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Kofi, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to say that today is the anniversary birthday of Miriam Makeba. If she was still alive, she would be 93 years old.
Now, who is
Miriam Makeba is a famous singer, struggle singer, who was married to, I think, not Al Jarreau, famous Black American singer. I forgot his name, but she was part of the struggle of South Africa using her voice, not just song, but liberation song. Very, very famous lady. You should check her up on Google if you can.
And what's her name? One more time.
Miriam. And then Makeba as in Makheba.
Okay.
Very famous struggle fighter using a voice all across the world.
I would definitely check her out. Thank you for this.
Yeah, and you may probably remember a song like Pata 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 Pata.
Give us a few bars. Give us a few bars. No, I'll look her up.
I'm not quite a good singer, but these are some of her songs. But you check, you will like them. She's just unbelievable. Yeah.
I'll definitely check her out, man. Thank you for this.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Be safe. All right. I see him in the background, the man himself, Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof is a former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense. He's an author, a regular contributing analyst to RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense. Welcome to the show, Michael. How you doing today, man? You doing all right?
Well, I'm struggling with a head cold. Even I remember Miriam Makeba.
I don't remember. See, you guys are a little bit older than I am. I was a kid during.
Yeah, we're from the last millennium.
Yeah, the last millennium. Welcome to the show. I'm sorry you feel bad.
Thank you.
But I do appreciate
that's the way it goes. Thank you.
Trump has put the screws to Zelensky. There's that. So apparently, and I'll read it from Bloomberg. It says, according to Bloomberg, the freeze affects the equipment already designated for delivery, including weapons, transits to aircraft, ships on waiting in transit in Poland. The suspension also is to stay in place until Trump sees the Ukrainian leader, quote, demonstrate good faith commitment to peace. That's according to Bloomberg. They continue, according to the New York Times, the order takes effect immediately and affects more than 1 billion in, quote, arms and ammunitions in the pipeline and on order, unquote. This is, quote, the president has been clear. He is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure it is contributing to a solution, unquote. It all stops. Hey, you're about to use that gun? Yeah, not now. That bullet that was going there, not anymore. That tank, that aircraft, that whatever, it all stops. If Zelensky wanting to be a tough guy in the way that Donald Trump says it, you're going to be a tough guy by yourself. What is going to be the effect of this on the ground?
I think it's causing the Ukrainians, particularly their Rada, to rethink the direction that they've been going. They're being hard-nosed. Apparently, their Rada just passed a resolution of some kind endorsing the minerals deal, which sends a message to Zelensky, basically saying, "Look, this is about as good as it's going to get," and any U.S. support, whether it's economic or military, is essential to stay in the game. Otherwise, we're all alone. And I think even the Ukrainians recognize how disorganized and unprepared and ill-equipped Europe is. Europe would not be able to do it on its own. So
but see, there's the
they're
rub.
left with little choices.
The mineral deal at this point, it's not really the point anymore. I mean, Donald Trump has effectively said you can't come back to the White House until you're ready to talk peace.
Well, that is the overarching issue. He wants him to have he wants him to change his attitude.
Yes. Yes.
you want peace, not war, not to continue the war. And Zelensky has demonstrated war, and he says it's a long way off and things like that. Peace is a long way off. Well, Trump said, not on my watch, and we're going to do things differently.
That was the other thing, where Zelensky says something like it's far, far away or something like that. And Trump took severe issue with him pointing out, like, dude, what do you mean peace is far off? You're missing the boat. This was one of the exchanges in the meeting that Donald Trump pointed out. Do you see how difficult it is to get a deal with this guy? And this is, right here.
Fight it out in the American media.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on out here. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're
again,
running low on soldiers.
Listen,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a
with
ceasefire
guarantees.
because you'll get a ceasefire faster than it agrees. It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like.
He is pointing out this is difficult to do a business like this, and I'm glad the American public sees it.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he's saying, I want the American public to see what I'm dealing with, and that this fight gave him space to do what he probably wanted to do anyway, which was stop the weapons.
Everyone thinks, everyone believes that, the Democrats believe that Trump ambushed Zelensky, but in fact, Zelensky attempted to ambush the president, because they had a meeting before that, about an hour meeting before that, in which everything was hunky-dory, peachy cream, and only then did Zelensky want to make a point about wanting greater security in front of the media, and it backfired on him. And that's when both Vance and Trump turned the tables on him, and for good reason, because it's very clear that Zelensky knew that meeting was for one purpose and one only. It was not to talk about military. It was to work out the minerals deal. And having that minerals deal would be by having economic security, it probably would be a better and a greater guarantee to Ukraine for a lasting ceasefire if one could be established.
Explain that. Go into that. Explain why.
Well, because you're going to have companies coming in and working, and also and they're going to be spread out all over the place, because the minerals, the rare, there aren't that many rare earths in unoccupied Ukraine. It's more minerals, right? But the real rare earths are in the east, and it has also now prompted Putin to think, well, maybe I ought to make a deal with Trump too. And this is where it's coming. You know, you're better off having an economic, having security through economics opportunities, sharing that, than trying to wage a military conflict. That's the last resort.
Which is why Britain and France told Zelensky to sign the deal. It's trapping the U.S. It's entangling us into Ukraine.
Yeah, but now the Brits and the French are thinking, well, you know what? Maybe we ought to try to get in on the minerals deal ourselves on our own. And so they're thinking that, but they're like Johnny-come-latelys. They've had 3 years to work out something creative to stop the conflict. Trump has said, you didn't do it. I've done it in a month, and this is the way it's going to be. And now he has a greater geostrategic goal. And that is reestablishing and normalizing relations with Russia. Already, I've seen exchanges where there's talk of lifting sanctions, even lifting sanctions on Sputnik and RT. And so we're seeing that. Yeah, so there's that possibility. So There's a lot of action going on behind the scenes, but it's more of a strategic outlook, because being pinned down with this little country, which has very questionable national security interest to the U.S., is a problem when there are greater geostrategic ambitions that need to be achieved, and joint ventures, frankly. And Trump has basically said he's not going to let Ukraine bog him down. Now the Europeans may want to go at it. I mean, they're so confused. I can't figure out from one minute to the next what their goal is. They claim that they want to put boots on the ground, planes in the air. That's what Starmer said, but it's caveated with strong U.S. backing.
Right.
Well, guess what? That's not happening, brother.
Yeah, Trump keeps telling them no, and they keep coming up with these conferences.
Yeah, they're not listening.
Yeah,
it's like you got two people in the same room, but they're not talking to each other.
It's like, what if we put 10,000 down as opposed to 5? Would you give us a backstop? Trump's like, no. What about 20,000 and airplanes? No. And they keep coming up with these stupid formulations.
Yeah,
How
it's crazy.
long can Ukraine last without U.S. support on the battlefield?
Not long at all. They will whatever they may already have in the pipeline and may already have in their stores, and would be it. And whatever, and because the Europeans wouldn't be able to make it up, they don't have the industrial base to consistently grind it out. Mm-hmm. And what is going in is limited, frankly. And the Ukrainians have a reputation for going through their ammunition and everything like crazy, like water. Yeah. And it wouldn't last very long in any event. So even if this were now that it has stopped, I think it's going to be a matter of weeks, and I think it's going to be a reality check for Zelensky and for the Ukrainian people to either say, look, Zelensky either changes or you change him and get another leader in. And I think that's where it's heading.
Well, I guess the question becomes, if the Ukrainian military collapses, any chip that they had on the board goes away right off the bat.
Oh yeah,
Trump.
Look. Trump told Zelensky, "You're operating from a position of weakness. You have no cards." And in fact, that's how he talks to him, but he's not going to have him in a negotiation with Putin. The man is weak, and same with the Europeans. Their display this week was an atrocity in terms of having a grip on reality. Plus, we're wondering whether we should even continue supporting them anymore, given their penchant for disregarding our basic values, mm-hmm. Democracy, freedom of the press, things of that sort. Canceling out opposition groups, canceling elections. What kind of crap is that? Yeah.
What do you make of this quote unquote emergency meeting that Macron, Starmer, they didn't invite Orban, apparently. They didn't invite Fico, apparently. But basically, the coalition of warmongers and the willing. Poland has effectively said, we're not putting troops on the ground. Germany, it seems that they're not willing to do that without the U.S. support, despite all of the belly aching that is coming out of Europe in regards to Donald Trump taking a different tack and a different policy. I've never seen a situation where Europe has effectively repudiated America in this way by hugging and rubbing on Zelensky after his, ass rimming when he was here with Trump advance.
They regard him as European, and we're the outsider. But we still have the military might, the production. Europe cannot survive without the United States. And as I've been saying, I believe in the past, even here, I believe that this episode is the beginning of the end of NATO as we now know it. It's just not going to thrive any longer, because the reality is that the big guys, the pachyderms, want to make peace with one another, and which obviates the need for NATO The Warsaw Pact went away back in 1991,
Yes.
but NATO expanded. And that's what actually triggered the SMO in 2022. And the Democrats and the West conveniently want to disregard that. And that's to their detriment, because that is fact and that is reality. And they were warned over and over and over again. It isn't that Putin woke up one morning and conducted a blitzkrieg. He warned that this NATO expansion was creating a threat to Russia, the Russian Federation's security. And he made that point abundantly clear over and over again.
To make all of this worse, Zelensky, after being kicked out of the White House, because he was effectively kicked out the White House, goes on the Fox News, bitches and moans about the war, wouldn't apologize. They tried to get him to apologize over and over again. He wouldn't do it. He goes to Europe, bitches about America, bitches about Trump. Europe does the same, complains about Trump, complains about America, so they need a new global leader to represent Europe, or to represent the quote unquote free world, because America has effectively abdicated responsibility for that particular role. Zelensky apparently goes on the Financial Times, complains bitterly, says that Putin blew off the Minsk agreements, which is a mind-blowing statement. Like, that statement is mind-blowing.
It's just the opposite. It was just the opposite.
Completely the opposite, right? Zelensky got in order to implement the Minsk agreements too, didn't do it. He was technically told he didn't have to do it, and so he didn't do it. Angela Merkel, Hollande are on record saying they lied about the agreements. So it is an astonishing thing for Zelensky to go anywhere and basically contradict reality to such a degree. Do you see the weapons ever being turned back on at this point?
I don't think so. I think you're actually going to see the Ukrainians coming back in hat in hand, wanting to do the minerals deal.
But see, the mineral deal is different from the war.
Yeah, that's going to be their security. That's going to be the new security reality from the United States, because you'll have American presence in the country.
Yeah, but how does that work? The war is still going on. Russia's still taking territory. They're still moving.
They stop shooting. You stop shooting. That's what happens. You declare a ceasefire. Somebody says, okay, we're going to stop firing at such and such a date. The other side agrees. And I don't even think you need so-called peacekeepers. You see, the Europeans still want to put so-called peacekeepers in.
That's
a non-starter. That's not going to happen.
But so it's a ceasefire. Russia said, we are not accepting the ceasefire.
Yeah, they want it to stop. They want it to stop. I think once you stop to work out these deals, it stopped. It won't be a ceasefire. It'll be a permanent, what do you call it? It's not ceasefire.
New security architecture.
Stops the shooting. Yeah.
What do you think that new security architecture looks like? Are we looking at, okay, all of Donbass is now part of Russia, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, I forget there's one more territory, but that those are now part of the Russian Federation. Kharkov, thank you. Ukraine is demilitarized. Ukraine is neutral. A new government. Like, these are going to be the Russian wants. In fact, this is going to be the Russian demands. Will a U.S. president accept those?
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, that's the reality. He's the president of common sense and reality. And how are you going to kick the Russians out? They're not going to go back and give up territory that's Russian speaking. They're not going to do that, because all of the discrimination against the Russian speakers will begin all over again. And the trudging on their liberties and democracies as citizens will be undertaken by the Ukrainians. Once again, they've already outlawed the Orthodox Church. I mean, the democracy in Ukraine is laughable, and for us to suggest that is the beacon of democracy, to save democracy in the West, is just nonsense. And we got to stop accepting these glowing terms. We got to look at things in through the prism of reality, not ideology. And we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We got to start. We got to wake up and give ourselves a little pinch and say, okay, this is the way it is, and move on. And that's what Trump is trying to instill in that brash little guy in the little green pajama suit.
He looked like a janitor. They were mocking the hell out of him over that.
Well, they're trying to get a message across to him. When you come to the Oval Office, you dress up.
Yes.
Period.
I guess last
End of
question.
story.
What do you make of the sanction relief? Trump seems to be moving forward with resuming diplomatic relations with Russia. One of the things he's told the Treasury Department, it was Treasury and State Department, to basically figure out how to unravel all of these sanctions that the Biden administration has implemented. How do you think he's going to do it? I guess that's the first question. And what does it mean when he does?
Well, I think he will. I don't think he would have ordered it unless he wanted it done, because he's undertaken a course of action that's to renormalize relations between Russia and the United States. That's the bottom line. They're also talking about the exchange of ambassadors. They've now named the new ambassadors for each country.
Yes.
And they should be in shortly. Increase in staff, because you'll recall that under Obama, and even I guess under Trump as well, first term, they were kicking out diplomats.
Right.
They're all going to probably come back. So there's an effort now to, and maybe also open up new consulates. They're trying to reestablish the normalization process that existed prior to this Russia hoax nonsense. And I think that that's the direction they're going to be going. Plus, the United States confiscated or seized Russian properties that they owned, that they actually owned in Maryland. They want that back. That was their little vacation place, you know.
They just stole it.
You want to get the oyster, you want to get the oysters and things like that. You know, it's near the bay.
Michael, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate your analysis on this stuff. Michael Maloof, I hope you feel better, man. I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. Well, it happens.
You should have told me. I wouldn't have dragged you out here like this if I knew you felt bad.
I was on my deathbed.
Michael Maloof, former senior security policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, and regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of federal service in the U.S. Department of Defense, and he's a great friend of the show. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. We'll talk later. Bye-bye.
All right. Michael Maloof, my man. It sucks that he feels bad. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag. I did not know that he felt bad. But we are coming to the end of another show, episode 106. Jesus, 106 episodes. Let's go into the chat. What's going on, chat? Jabari, VOC Media, Jamal, you're killing. Funny. I love it. But I do think once the EU becomes broke, he'll come back or get killed for being honest. See, the EU is already broke. That's the rub with the EU. They're already broke. And so this notion that they're going to somehow support the war, I mean, they can't even put 2% in for NATO, and you're going to support another war. Good luck. Good luck. I'd be super curious to see him do it, frankly. Tip for the Deep Space Nine reference, Jonathan. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm a Deep Space Nine fan. It took me a while to love it. And then as I got older and got more politically, let's say, awakened, then it was a whole new show. It's a whole new show. Like, the entire premise of the show is this kind of apartheid slavery environment that the Federation is coming into and trying to rebuild a society that was similar to Gaza, frankly. You had the Cardassians who had taken the land. You had the Bajorans who were fighting back in order to kick them out in a guerrilla war that took place over the course of like 50, 100 years, something like that. And it was in a rebuilding phase. And it wasn't just a rebuilding of the land, but also of people. Because this idea that you treat people horribly and you come out with roses is nonsense. It's chess logic. If you put your bishop, if we're playing the Ruy Lopez and you drop your bishop on my knight, most of the times I'm going to play a6. I'm going to attack you. Get off me. I may play b5. Get off me. But you must understand the contours of the game is being shaped by the maneuvers of white and black, or black is making a response. You doing bad things to people does not create a beautiful environment. It usually creates people who are responding. I am what you made me. It was the same thing on Deep Space Nine. It was the same thing in Gaza. It was the same thing in regards to the Black revolutionary movements. It was the same thing in South Africa. It is what it is, what it is. Is it a basis of reality? Deep Space Nine hits that and hits it hard with a bell. It is a fascinating show. It is a fantastic show. Got me talking about Star Trek. You got me talking about Star Trek. I'm sorry. Let's keep going. Mr. Ripley, Dreamscape was mid-80s. Neat. What's that? Neat flick? Oh, Netflix cribbed it for 0 Day. Ted might be the 20-part history of the 20th century told through bad movies. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Charlie Wilson's War. That's another one. That gives this kind of fictional portrayal of something that happened in real life. Mr. Ripley, thank you, my man. Mr. G1804, Elon, is that deal too? Battery EVs. This belief that Elon Musk is just a good guy, just working for the best interests of America, nonsense. It's nonsense. He's obviously, A, you're close to power. B, you're influencing power. C, you're the richest man on the planet with your hand in all sorts of avenues. Don't tell me that his association with power does not benefit him in the business or economic world. I think it's nonsense. So yeah, absolutely right, Mr. G. And false mint dissident, I'm sorry. I'm on season 3 of Deep Space Nine after TNG. This is a great storytelling. Yes. Yes. Because you must understand, Deep Space Nine, Next Generation is the golden era of Trek. If you're looking at comic books, this would be the golden age Superman, the golden age Flash. This is when the Federation has pacified its enemies. The Federation is now in this mindset of, we're not warriors. We're not a military organization. We're exploration. That's what we do. Even when you have this conversation, there was this great conversation with Patrick Stewart, John Picard. And he's effectively saying the military is a small part of an officer's responsibility. I think Riker said it. Basically, we're not a military. We are in exploration. That is what we do. That is what we are. Yes, we have weapons to protect ourselves, but we are scientists. We are explorers. Then they meet the Borg. And they are fundamentally broken, destroyed. They get their asses kicked. That loss of life is astonishing in the Star Trek parlance. Wolf 359, where the Borg, one ship destroys all of these ships by Star Trek. And Star Trek is like, all right, we need to build warships. All of this explorer stuff is nice, but we need somebody to take care of the kids. And so they go into these secret war programs to deal with a threat that they've never come across before. And then you get Deep Space Nine, where they stumble into a fight with the Dominion. And they stumble into a fight with the Dominion in very similar ways that liberals stumble into fights now. We believe in freedom. We believe in expansion. What do you mean we can't expand into this area that we don't own, that we don't belong to, or that we haven't even looked into to see who, if anybody, owns? How dare they tell us that we can't do this? And you meet an organization that don't care about your values. They don't care about this notion of freedom and egalitarianism and liberty. They don't care about that stuff. So how does a federation, an organization that believes these things, that has these values, deal with an entity that don't? Deep Space Nine is so good. It's so good. I'm sorry, you got me talking about Star Trek, but it is so good. All right, I'm going to end this because we are talking about Star Trek. And when I'm talking about Star Trek, nobody cares. The Borg was a wake-up call. Yes, the Borg was a wake-up call. The Borg was a wake-up call. I mean, a serious wake-up call. And if you remember, it was Q who did it. And there's a belief that Q did it for the benefit of Star Trek. Even though at the time he's like, hey, crack some eggs. Or, you know, you want to be explorers. Sometimes you get your knuckles wrapped. So good. So good. You got me talking about this. I can't believe you got me talking about this. All right. The Borg was my favorite episodes. Q was my favorite episodes. I thought Q... So there are two parts. In the Pale Moonlight, where Cisco... And you know what? Star Trek purists hated that. I loved it for the exact same reason that they hated it. If your world is love and light, then you could be a paragon of virtue. Meaning, if I don't have any challenges, I can be the nicest person on the planet. I can be beautiful. I can sparkle in the daylight. Okay, what happens when you're hungry? What happens when you don't have a home? What happens when you need to make ends meet? What happens when you have a kid to feed? Can you still be the paragon of virtue in those situations? What happens if you are under assault? What happens if you're living in an apartheid state? What happens if you're living in a dictatorship? Can you be that paragon of virtue? And what does a paragon of virtue mean in the context of living in an environment like that? That's the crux of the issue for Star Trek and Deep Space Nine. How do you deal as the best human being that you could be in an environment that doesn't care, a universe that doesn't care about your values? You are choosing those values. You, as a group, you're choosing that. The universe doesn't give a shit that you're chosen that. And so how do you deal with Cardassians, Romulans, Klingons? Klingons have slave markets, for God's sake. The Romulans, Cardassians, they are as cynical can get as a species and would do any and everything to take advantage. Morality doesn't matter. How do you, as Star Trek, deal with that world? It's a fascinating conversation. And the Dominion brings it into focus in a way that you can't get out of Deep Space, that you can't get out of New Generation, Next Generation. It's just good. It's just a fantastic show. Yeah, I ended on that. You got me talking about Star Trek. You made my day. Look, I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You can support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, stickers, all of those things. All of those things deeply help the content. You have my deepest appreciation for doing so. Even if you just like the video, you have my deepest appreciation. Signing off. Chat, shout out to all of you. Frank Frial, Nick Curtis, Pharaoh Agent, Arcane Eclectic, Brandon DeMoz, Alexander G, Joanna, Adam Price, all of you. Shout out to you. Thank you for joining me. The Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 106. Signing off. Have a good day, everyone.